Okay. Well, let's get started. Oh, here he is.
Hey, how you
So
doing?
let's call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, June 28th, 2007. Can we have a roll call, Charlie?
Commissioner Cardoza,
Here.
Commissioner Flores,
Here.
Commissioner Hoff,
Here.
Commissioner Jeffrey,
Here.
Vice Chair Donaldson,
Here.
Chair Martin.
Here.
6 commissioners are present, and Commissioner Germain has an excused absence this evening.
Thank you, Charlie. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2 on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda? This is your opportunity to address the commission. Seeing no one, we'll go on to the next item. It's the action recap from the meeting of May 24th, 2007. I actually have a couple comments. Does anyone else have some changes they'd like to see? Let's see, on page 4 of 5, in the third paragraph from the bottom where it summarizes my comments on the park plan. Let's see. In the second sentence, it states he would like to see a big tree planted to be used for climbing, and I'd like added to that, and prefers the rocks and ropes in the advanced play area. And then the following sentence reads, he would like the seat wall eliminated, and after the word wall, I'd like the word and central stage eliminated. And under the following sentence, it states, maybe the restroom gate could be locked at night and eliminate the green roof. I didn't want the green roof eliminated. What I wanted eliminated was the solar panel and the gray water system. And in the following, let's see, sentence after the following, it states, also he suggested motion activator sensors for the fence, and that was actually for the bathroom, not the fence. And delete the statement making it simple like the fence around the community garden. That was not my suggestion, so delete that phrase. And in the second to last sentence, it says, keep the truss over the entrance. That was actually keep the arbor over the entrance. So those were my comments with regard to the park plan. And then I also had some comments under commissioner comments on page 5 of 5 in the second paragraph. Actually, we have dead trees along both sides of 65 in the last sentence. It says replacing on the north side of 65th Street. It's actually both sides, so I'd like north side, the word along substituted for north side there.
Oh,
And with that,
Oh,
did you
along.
capture that, or should I hand you my
yeah,
minute?
no, I was just changing it to both sides, but
Okay.
you want to change to along.
Both sides is fine.
Okay.
So with that, if no one objects to those revisions, can I have a motion on the minutes?
I move to approve with Jim's recommended changes.
Second.
So motion by Commissioner Jeffrey and second by Donaldson. Without objection, we will go to the next agenda item, which is Director's Report. Charlie?
Yes, well, first and foremost, I want to congratulate Commissioners Martin and Jeffrey on their reappointment to the commission for another 3-year term until 2010.
Is that the right term?
I think so.
Congratulations.
2010 sounds like another
Yes, it
century,
sounds a
doesn't
long
it?
time ago.
As did 2000.
Yes.
As you know, Commissioner Germain has decided not to seek reappointment. The council will be making an appointment to fill that vacancy at their next meeting on July 17th, and hopefully the new commissioner will be seated in time for your next meeting on July 26th. So tonight would have been his last meeting if he had stuck around for after some 20 years on the Planning Commission. So I'm assuming you would like to have a roast of some sort for him at a future meeting. I think we'll have to play that by
Absolutely.
ear and see how he is feeling, but I would
Definitely.
suggest July or August, depending on his condition.
Yeah, let's just keep it open and keep in touch with him about his condition.
In addition, the commission will need, as you know, Paul is one of your 3 representatives on the General Plan Steering Committee and has been the vice chair of the committee. So the steering committee is also losing a member as a result of this. So the commission will need to think about nominating another representative in addition to Commissioners Jeffrey and Donaldson on the steering committee. City
Harley,
Council.
I wanted to ask you, is the application process for commissioner positions closed at this point, or is the council still considering other applications?
They haven't formally issued an announcement about the opening, except for every year the city clerk does a routine announcement in December or January of all of the upcoming regular vacancies, if you will. So that was done in conformance with the Maddie Act back at the beginning of the year. What the council has decided to do is to look at all of the applications that were made last year, and they're simply reviewing those.
Oh,
If somebody wants to submit an application, I don't think there's anything to prevent that before the July 17th council meeting.
so
But
there were no actual new applications. They just simply
Not
looked
that
at
I'm
last
aware
year's-
of. They're
Oh,
not
okay.
actively soliciting.
Somebody called me this week from the city of Emeryville to see if I wanted to apply.
Oh,
Or no, if my application, if I'd like to come in. And
okay, because of last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
That must have been the intern. All right. So the city council has had 2 meetings since your last meeting on June 5th and June 19th. At the June 5th meeting, they held a study session on the Affordable Housing Set-Aside Ordinance and another study session on the Disabled Transportation Needs Assessment Report. They also passed a motion to appeal your decision on the Doyle Hollis Park to themselves, which they are entitled to do under the zoning ordinance. And they held the second reading of the ordinance, or they passed the second reading of the ordinance on Planning Commission compensation, which you know all about, so I won't belabor that one. On June 19th, the council heard an informational report on priority development areas. That was actually on the consent calendar, and it wasn't pulled for discussion. But just to briefly let you know what that is, this is coming out of the regional initiative, the so-called Focusing Our Vision Regional Planning Initiative, where ABAG is soliciting applications for so-called priority development areas, which are sort of like transit-oriented development areas under a different name. And those areas will then be eligible for future funding for grants and loans and technical assistance. At this point, frankly, it's sort of unclear, and they haven't really figured out quite what that program is all about. And there will be an application process each year. We advise the council that it would be, in our opinion, we would recommend applying next year after the general plan is hopefully completed, or at least a lot farther along, and the council agreed with that. So we won't be applying this year, but we probably will be applying next year. The council also heard the protest of the traffic impact fees for the Furniture Oasis project, and they voted unanimously to waive the fee. You may recall, those of you who were here then, that the project was approved by the commission last year in April, and at that time when you approved it, you also voted unanimously to recommend to the council that the fee be waived or reduced. As you may know, the traffic impact fee is imposed by ordinance, and neither the staff nor the planning commission has the authority to waive it or reduce it. Only the city council can do that, and they did vote to waive that fee. They also heard the appeal of your decision at your April 26th meeting on Pete's, and as you may recall, the only outstanding item was the parking along Holden Street. A compromise was struck at the meeting between Pete's and the Artist Co-op, which will allow public use of the 5 northernmost parking spaces on Holden Street that are adjacent to the Artist Co-op. And in exchange for that, Pete's will be allowed to park in the easement area until the city needs it. You may recall that the commission's conditions prohibited parking in the easement area. They are now allowed to park there, which will get them an extra 3 or 4 spaces. The council appointed 2 Emory secondary students as non-voting members to the General Plan Update Steering Committee. A review of the preservation ordinances was also on the agenda. This was discussed by the commission in March at a study session, you may recall. However, the council put that over to their next meeting in July because it was after midnight by the time they got to that item. The General Plan Steering Committee held its last meeting 2 days ago on Tuesday the 26th, where they heard a report from MIG on the results of the April workshops. And they're going to hold a special meeting on a Saturday in July for a tour of the various change areas. There will be probably an Emery go-around bus, and that will be a public meeting open to anyone who wants to come to the extent that the bus has room for them. It'll probably be on the 14th or the 21st, and that will be announced after it's firmed up. Throughout the summer, the steering committee is going to be deliberating on a preferred plan with the help of our consultant team, MIG and Diet and Bhatia. And we anticipate another joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council probably in the fall after that's done to review that preferred plan. And meanwhile, Diet and Bhatia is going to start working on the zoning ordinance update and the design guidelines and the EIR. And that's all I have to report about the Council and the General Plan Committee. And unless you have any questions about those things, I do have a report back on a number of items that you asked me about at your last meeting. Okay, well, you may recall at your last meeting under Commissioner comments, several of you asked me to look into a number of different things, mostly having to do, in fact, I think all having to do with trees and landscaping. And I have done that, and I believe as Maurice Kaufman is also here, and he can probably provide further information if I can't answer any questions you may have. First, with regard to the trees at the Glass House project, the trees along Hollis Street, the street trees along Hollis Street are being protected, except for one, which has to be removed for a driveway. The trees on 65th Street were removed in accordance with the approved plans, and they are going to be replaced. For all the trees that are being removed and replaced, Pulte is being required to pay a replacement value fee under the Urban Forestry Ordinance, and that is approximately $30,000. For Bay Street, I was asked about the landscaping or lack thereof on the east side of the project adjacent to the railroad tracks. And I looked into that and found that there was no landscaping shown there on the PUD plans that were approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council. Crushed gravel is what was shown in that area on the building permit plans, and that was approved because that's what the Planning Commission and City Council approved plans showed.
And a huge sign over the side of the whole building.
That was also in the plans.
This is before
we-
our time, Jim. We can't be paying for that.
We as you know, we may be having ramps in that area for the new South Bayfront pedestrian bicycle bridge, and in conjunction with that project, we will investigate the possibility of adding landscaping to the area.
Great.
Around the ramp area. It was pointed out that there are dead trees, as you noted in the action recap, along Overland and 65th Street. Our acting Public Works Director, Maurice Kaufman, says that he has noticed those as well, and he's planning to send a letter to both the courtyards and Emery Tech telling them they need to maintain the trees and replace any dead ones. On the East Bay Bridge Shopping Center, you asked about the dead landscaping there and enforcement of the conditions of approval about that. As I said at that time, Sudesh Muhendru, our consulting architect, has prepared a plan under the auspices of the Community Preservation Committee, and that is this, which I will flash at you and then take away because you can't see it yet. But anyway, this is the document that has been prepared, and it's going to be formally presented to the City Council at a study session on July 17th. And we would like to follow that up with a study session here at the Commission where he can come make a presentation on this on July 26th at your next meeting. It does include ideas for enhancing the existing center, which would include new and improved landscaping and improvement to the existing landscaping. So our strategy at this point is to try a friendly persuasion kind of an approach to this center. If we find that that doesn't work, then we will go down the enforcement path. But we would prefer not to go that route at the present time while this process is happening. Finally, on the 61st Street Mini Park, Public Works is aware of the problem of the missing trees, and it has been discussed at the Public Works Committee. Apparently those trees have been vandalized and replaced several times. Every time they're replaced, they get vandalized again. So at this point, the committee is proposing to either install concrete or ground cover in those tree wells. However, there are a number of other trees on the streets surrounding the park, and Maurice said he was not aware of any problem with the planting along the fence, but he will look into that and fix any problems that there may be there. I think that covers everything you asked me about, but if I missed anything, please let me know, and I'll look into it. And if you have any questions on what I just told you, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
I think there's been some discussion about adding some additional play equipment to the tot lot that probably would go right where those trees sit. So before you do anything more there, you might want to make sure it's not going to get ripped out. Thanks, Charlie. So next item on the agenda is the public hearing items. We have 2 public hearing items tonight, and what we will do is hear from staff first, and then we'll hear from the applicant, and then we'll hear from any interested member of the public. We'll ask members of the public to limit their comments to no more than 5 minutes and ask you to come up to the dais and fill out the form there. Frank, you have to recuse
I
yourself
do.
on the first item.
Live within 500 feet also. My company does
Great.
development.
The first item on the agenda is the view 46 temporary banner signs at 1001 46th Street. And Susan, this is your item.
I think Susan is passing out the missing page from the staff report, right? Is that what it is? Yeah. The missing, no, it's okay. Well, I'll take one, yeah. Thank you.
No, I don't. So the other one.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is a variance and a major sign permit to allow 2 4 feet by 8 feet temporary real estate banner signs in the residential zone. A variance is required for this because the size of the signs exceeds what is allowed for development in residential zones. Currently, the code allows 4 square feet for development signs, and the applicant is requesting larger than that, as well as more signs than 1. The project site is 1 parcel bounded by Adeline, 46th, 45th, and Linden Streets. Linden Street being in Oakland. You can see the city boundary line there. Staff believes that the variance request is eligible for consideration for the following reasons. Number 1, most development in the area is on a smaller scale, with single-family residences, duplexes, and triplexes being the norm in the zone. This size, the proposed signage is to advertise a larger 79-unit multifamily project. And a second reason is that it also has a mixed-use component, having a already approved commercial component located in the same corner that the proposed banner signs will be installed, which is here.
Are those signs blocking windows?
They are not currently blocking windows, to my knowledge.
I'm assuming that's like a stairwell, where the stairs are.
Where's the sign?
Right here.
Oh, 1 on 40th.
We're going to ask you,
Yeah.
She's
May I-
one of the applicants.
May I suggest that Susan complete her report, and then she can respond to questions, and maybe
Great.
the applicant can as well?
Okay. Okay. All right, so where was I here? Okay. The third reason for that justifies the variance is that a height variance was granted for the project at its initial use permit stage to allow a 66-foot high building in the 30-foot zone. It's a reuse of a former industrial site. So the larger signage is necessary to look good in the context of a larger building, a larger mass on the street. The site fronts on a major thoroughfare of Adeline Street, and the signs will be facing both north and west to provide for maximum exposure for the for sale units located there. The time frame for removal of the banners is tied to the sale of the last unit, since they are for sale units, or 6 months after approval of the installation, whichever comes first. And here's another copy of the sign.
Very simple.
And as far as I know, they're just proposing 2 of the same kind of sign. Okay.
Great. Any questions, Susan? Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Good evening, commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jan Newbegin. I represent 46th Street Lofts Property LLC, which is the developer of View 46. If you've been down Adeline lately, you've seen that we're well underway in construction on the project. We have a temporary certificate of occupancy for the sales center retail space, which is at the corner of 46 and Adeline. Last Thursday, we hosted a neighborhood event to preview the sales space, and Frank Flores, who stepped out for this, was in attendance, as well as some other city members. And we're very excited to get underway with the sales effort for the project. Site signage is one of the most cost-effective methods of advertising, and we're hoping to get as much bang for our buck as possible out of this, because it's a very difficult market right now, and it's in everyone's best interest to have the homes sold and occupied, the cities as well as ours. We'd be very happy to sell out as quickly as possible. After we made our submittal for the variance, we realized there were a couple of issues with what we requested, one of which has already been observed, which is that the signage does block windows in a couple of the units that are on the 3rd floor. And the other is that this is not scaled correctly, so the signs are smaller than they appear. This scale shows them to be more like 30 feet wide by 8 feet high. So this is much smaller than the signs actually are in reality. As a result, we rethought our proposal a little bit. These are going to look a little small, but these are elevations that are similar to the ones that you just saw. The one that's on the top is the south elevation, which would be visible driving north on 45th Street above the retail space that's at the corner of 45th and Adeline. The west elevation, which is on the bottom left, would be at the same corner that would be visible driving east along 45th Street. And the third potential location is at the corner of 45th and Linden, would be visible driving up Adeline towards the north.
So you are now asking for 3 signs.
We would be thrilled to get 2 out of the 3.
No,
but
you're showing
yes.
3 signs here,
Yes.
though, if I
Yeah.
understand this elevation
Right.
correctly.
And you mentioned Linden. I thought these were all on Adeline corners.
Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. These are on Adeline corners. So the one is driving. It's a little difficult to visualize, but driving up Adeline towards the building.
You'd
That's
see it
where you get the
from
north.
both
The size of
directions,
the
and then you'd see one looking straight at the building.
Right, coming up
Well,
45th Street.
If I understand correctly, the top drawing is going north on Adeline. The lower right drawing is going south on Adeline. And the lower left drawing is on the west side of the building, and you would see that going east on 45th Street. Is that correct? I mean, west on 45th Street.
Well, the
No.
west,
Oh,
the
maybe
west
not.
elevation is.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm wrong.
Look straight at the west elevation, you'd see
Okay,
that.
yeah, the
Right.
west elevation would be facing Adeline.
Right.
That's right. So
Facing Adeline, so
so
driving
you'd
up
see it going
45th.
east on 46th.
The upper, this
Yeah,
upper
46,
figure
which is off
the
center.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Right.
I misspoke.
Yeah.
So let's go over that again. The
So-
top figure is,
It's
that
the
Adeline?
south elevation.
so
Which you would
Adeline is
see
on
going
the
north.
left edge. Adeline's on the left
Yeah.
edge of that top figure.
I think the lower two ones, they probably would have been helpful if those drawings had been reversed, because if I understand correctly now, those lower two ones are actually right around the corner from each other.
Right, those are the corner.
One's on
They're on
Yeah.
yeah, two sides of a corner
So
like this.
there must
Right.
be-
So the one on the right is actually facing 45th, and the one on the left is facing Adeline.
Right.
Okay.
And what is the dimension of these banners?
They would be approximately 6 feet wide by 30 feet tall.
What'd you say?
30 feet?
6 by 30.
If you
That's
see,
even larger than what your submittal was to us.
that's right, but it's closer to the scale of.
You know, this is, I'm sorry here, this is an example of getting information at the last minute that we've not had a chance to understand, and I would recommend that this be continued to our next meeting.
How does the rest of the commission feel about that?
Well, yeah, and I'd like to see a little more accurate.
Can you
drawing of
can you
Right.
put the
banner.
drawing on the overhead that you had of the
Maybe they
signs?
could,
Okay.
maybe they could submit a site plan, which would help figure out where the
Well, it's
Well, let's finish the presentation.
sorry,
And
but
let's
this-
open,
yeah.
I'd like to open the public hearing, because if there's someone who's come to this, I want to hear from them
Okay.
Right.
today.
Yeah.
So
And I apologize for the last minute nature of this. We did make and receive the signs and take them down and kind of have them to scale with the building, and they're practically invisible. The setbacks are so far from the street and so high up that they can't be seen.
Right.
They're meant to interface with driving traffic and not with pedestrian traffic, because they are elevated above the third floor.
So, excuse me, you had the original signs that we had in our original packet made, and you looked at them and said, nobody can see these?
Right.
Okay.
And we have them, they're on site, and if we approve the proposal as it's before you now, we would post those signs. But if we need to come back and do it again, I want to do it with something that you folks can improve. So I'd like to hear your comments on that, so that we know that we bring you something that is doable. These are 4 draft signs which we have for the vertical signage. This solves 2 problems. One is that they can be seen, and the other is that they will not interfere with the windows of the units that we'll be trying to sell. So once we start showing the units, if we bring people into them and the signage is in front of the units, it makes it more difficult to present them. All signage would start, as I said, at the 3rd floor and above, and the floor heights are very tall, so they would be set back from the street and up above the street level at a height of more than 30 feet. As I said, these are draft signs. The preference is that we not go with D, because it's too dark and bold, and want to have something that's a little more attractive for the street interface. So A and B are the preferred versions right now.
Oh, so you haven't made a final decision?
No, I just received the drafts from the designer yesterday.
And are you suggesting one or more of these options at particular corners or locations at this point, or you're just open to hearing from us what our preference might be?
I would be happy to hear your preferences. I have a personal preference for A, and we would probably do the same sign on all the corners.
Is that your logo in the upper
Yes, it is.
portion of A? Okay,
And that's how it's shown on the elevations.
right.
Do-
Any other questions for the applicant?
Do I understand this banner is 30 feet tall,
Yes.
and the building is 65 feet tall?
It's
So it's
66
going to
feet
be
tall.
half the height of the building.
Right.
I think the elevation that she showed previously
Could you go back to
showed
that?
that. I would point out that although, I mean, it is in a different location and a different zone, these signs are probably no larger than the banner that you approved on the courtyards.
Right.
Well,
In
just-
fact, it's narrower. It would be
what the-
narrower.
Narrower, yeah,
The
narrower
top
for sure.
elevation is what frontage? The top,
I'm sorry?
the top elevation is what street? The one on the top.
The top one is the west-facing elevation, which is facing Adeline.
Adeline. And then the lower left one?
The lower left one is facing Adeline, I believe.
At the
top
45th.
one.
No,
Yes.
the top one is facing Adeline. What you see on the corner of that south-facing elevation is the retail space.
No, I think the south-facing elevation faces 45th Street.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Right.
I get turned around on this. The bold mark at the bottom of the west-facing elevation is the face of the retail space, and you'll see that on the west-facing
Let's start
elevation.
again. The top elevation is what elevation? With the sign on the left corner. What elevation is that?
That's south-facing.
The top elevation on your
This top elevation here is facing Adeline Street.
that's Adeline
No, that's
Street.
facing 45th Street.
I'm
He's right.
I'm
It's
doing the
facing
same thing.
45th.
Okay, this is facing 45th.
Uh-huh.
This one is facing 46th, and this
Susan,
one
why-
is facing.
So this
Susan, why
sign
don't you
is
take your
Adeline.
why don't you take your pen and underneath each of those elevations in big letters, why don't you just write what the elevation is there?
Okay.
Or even better, mark it up on the site plan. That would help us with our orientation.
Well,
They don't have a
well, with
sign
these
for it.
elevations right here.
So in other words,
Go ahead and mark
this-
it right on
this
there, Susan.
Is this elevation
Well,
here?
that's what I thought, but now I don't know.
That's 45th Street.
Okay, that's
Okay.
this.
So that's at the corner of 45th and Adeline.
Right. At the base of that corner, there's a large tree.
More like this, so it's probably signs going like this.
And then-
So that would be above and behind the tree.
And Adeline, so the sign on Adeline Street is at the corner of Adeline and 46th
46th.
Street.
Yeah.
And then the last one is 46th.
It's also Adeline and 46, but facing the other corner.
So this one, I guess.
Yeah.
And the retail space is at Adeline
Could you go
and
back to
46th.
And
those
46,
Yeah, so that's
immediately
it.
below those.
Oh, there.
Yes,
I
the,
see.
like
the retail space is located here on this corner, and this is where the proposed locations of the new signs, from
So
my
one will
understanding.
be facing Adeline and one will be facing 46th Street.
And one will be facing 45th, yes. And the original proposal that you have in your packet here has the two, this is the same location as the two
What
signs.
was the sign in the original packet, size of the sign in the original?
They were
packet?
they were two signs, and they were 32 square feet each.
4 by 8.
4 feet by 8 feet.
So this is less
These
square
are
footage.
Right.
4 by 8.
This is more
and
square
these are
footage.
No,
3
it's
by,
more square footage. It's like triple the square
4
footage.
by 8 is 32 and this is,
It was 64.
Okay,
and
so
now-
where you all understand where the signs are proposed and the size of the signs.
And what is the square footage? Because our packet showed 64 square feet, so what is it now?
Each sign would be about approximately 6 by 30, which is the distance between the window wall and the edge of the building.
So 6 by 30.
So it's about
It's
180.
540. So you're going from 64 square feet to 540 square feet.
well,
180 times 3.
well, why, you went from 2 signs to 3 signs?
Yes, 3 signs to pick up the street frontage on those
There
3
isn't much
corners.
traffic on 46th Street, is there?
That's residential.
But the point is to capture the southbound Adeline view. That's
Oh, I
why they
see.
have
That's
that
what
there.
that one. And this other one would capture the northbound. Adeline.
Right. Okay, so is there any other
One-
thing you wanted to present to the commission before we open this public hearing and actually have a discussion with the commission?
Let me just make one comment. As I observed with Ms. Newbegin, she agreed. There are some fairly large trees, at least along the south side. I'm not sure about the north side. That would do 2 things. One is it would tend to obscure the signs. Secondly, it would tend to lessen the impact of their size. And she indicates they've gone out and kind of checked that out, and they feel that the signs could still be seen, but it would tend to, I think, somewhat soften the impact of signs of that size.
Well, I guess my question would be, if part of the sign is obscured by the trees, why make the sign that large? Why not just make the sign as large as what is visible from the street?
That's perfectly possible, and what it would do is on the signs like this. Knock off that bottom portion of the sign.
That's what the trees would do.
There's one area where the angle of the trees would make it harder to see that as driving down. But it just depends on how far away you are from it when you're driving. It's a little similar in scope to the sign that's on Green City Lofts, which is if you're walking on the street, you don't know it's there. But if you're driving, it's very visible and tells exactly what's happening at that project.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this item? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Frankly, reading through the staff report, seeing a sign that was 4 by 8 at this location, my initial reaction was this sign was way too small, and it did not make sense. Even though it was an attractive sign, it was just way too small for its function. And I have to agree, we've waited a long time for that building to get completed, and it's great to see progress, and I want to see those units sold. What I would like to do is suggest that if you've already made the 4 by 8 sign, you put the sign out on the side of the building, and if acceptable to everyone else, we can take a look at it before the next meeting and then have a educated conversation and discussion about what's appropriate. But I have to agree that I think 4 by 8 foot sign is inadequate on that building.
So you're suggesting that she put up the 4 by 8 foot sign that she already has? She doesn't have the big ones?
Right. And we continue this until the next meeting to
Well,
make a decision.
Well, I wonder if they could put it at a lower elevation, because if it were down at the first or second floor level, at least it might be visible for somebody driving by. These are 30 feet up in the air, and
Yeah, my point is just as a reference for discussion around a larger sign at our next meeting. Because frankly, I don't think the sign is large enough. If you've already done the 4 by 8, why don't you put it up where we're having this conversation, and then we can take a look at it before the next meeting, and we can talk about what's appropriate at the scale of that building.
Commissioner Martin?
Go ahead.
I would suggest if that's what the commission wants to do, that you should approve this application tonight, because technically she can't really put the sign up now without your approval.
well, I think the new
And then she could come back later for a modification.
I think the new sign is an improvement. It's no bigger than signs we've approved elsewhere in Emeryville. And it's very important that this project gets sold, and it's been delayed so long that,
What's the staff's recommendation on the revised sign?
Well, frankly, I hadn't seen it before this evening, but I think my initial reaction would be I would probably recommend approval.
I would recommend that we approve 2 signs out of the 3. I'd be in favor of going ahead with that. I think the signs are the appropriate size for the building. I think we should limit it to 2 signs and for 6 months.
Do you have a preference as to which 2?
Well, I think the ones where you get the visibility from Adeline, the one that you can see coming south and the other one coming north.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think those would be the better of the 3 signs.
Can we have those 4 alternatives put back up on the overhead, please?
I would actually agree with that, because if you have 2 signs on the corner, same corner of the building,
I'm against
you're
that.
going to see both of those signs from
Yeah.
just about any angle unless you're looking at the building straight on. So
My
one
idea
sign
was
is probably
to have the
adequate.
one sign on 46th Street where they'd see coming south, and the other sign on 45th where they'd see coming north.
well,
I think the size are in the proper scale for the building, and I would,
I
think
just
we
don't know
should-
what the trees do to this particular sign. I mean, we had the applicant say that there's going to be partial screening of the lower portion of the sign. I guess if you're comfortable with that, then maybe it's not an issue, but that's one of the reasons I was suggesting that we continue it, so we can take another
well,
look
that
at
would
this.
just minimize the effect of the sign, so it would be a plus.
well, actually, we want the sign to be effective, because it's only here
Well,
for 6
I'm sure-
months.
Can you
And-
raise it up so it's above the tree line?
Can you speak into the microphone there?
I think that as they're designed, the bottom portion of it, which is an image, a lifestyle image of people, is not the critical part of the sign. What we want up there is the website and the phone number. And if we get some tree impact, it's going to be the lower part of the sign. It's all about sight, line of sight angle. So I think that what you'll get is some screening of the bottom portion of the sign, like that. And that the top portion, where we're actually doing the website and this phone number, will still be visible.
This is only the sign at 46th and Adeline that would be partially screened by the tree?
Yes, the other corner is clear, so it's not got the kind of screening from trees that the other one does.
Okay. Patty?
Yeah, a couple things. As you probably gathered, I'm really upset about getting this information at the last minute, and I know staff wasn't aware of this, but we in the commission here have been trying to nip this in the bud, where we get a packet with new designs, new information at the last minute, and then we're supposed to make a recommendation on it. With the staff report we have, I was okay with signage on Adeline. I was not okay with signage on Linden. So I would be willing to move forward with Commissioner Hoff's recommendation to limit the signage to Adeline and nothing on the Linden Street side.
There was nothing.
Linden Street. Well, Linden and 45th Street. That's my understanding. There's
no,
supposed to be.
She had misrepresented that. It was actually
So
one
it's
here
both
and
here?
2 here. One here, one here.
Okay.
It's Adeline and 45th.
Okay.
So we would go with one here and
One here,
there.
yeah. So I would be willing to go along with that.
I'll
With
make
the larger
that
signs?
motion.
I'd second that if you want.
And as part of the motion that Commissioner Hoff just made, is there a preference for A in that motion of those options, which is what the applicant wanted?
They want to know which sign we prefer?
Yes, the preference and whether
Well,
that's part
I
of
would
your
go with
motion.
A, because if that's the one that's going to generate the most interest, we want to make sure that sign gets down as quickly as possible. So I would encourage that sign A be the one that's selected.
So
Do they
is
have
a-
to be the same, both signs?
They don't, no.
I like A the best.
Okay, is that part of your motion, Art?
Yes.
Okay. Is
Um,
that part of your second, Buzz?
Yes.
Okay. So we've modified the motion. We have a motion by Commissioner Card. Yes?
I just want to make a comment. In the conditions of approval, we have recommended that the sign be removed either 6 months from the date of approval or when the last unit in the project is sold, whichever comes first.
Oh.
That was my
That's-
intent.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
that's your
That was my
intent,
intent.
okay.
And if they need it longer, they'd come back to us. Is that right?
Correct.
With accurate information.
What, we repeat the conditions for removal of the sign? Because it seemed opposite to how we've handled. It's typically, isn't 60 days after. Will you repeat the two conditions for removal of the sign, please?
Says, the banners shall be removed either 6 months from the date of approval, which is tonight, presumably, or when the last unit in the project is sold, whichever comes first.
That's
So if
right.
they sell out the
So it'd be 6
project
months or
before
less.
6 months,
or less,
then they
hopefully
can't
less.
take them down.
Okay.
That's what we did on the last
Yeah.
one that came up. Remember, they wanted a year, and we gave them 6 months.
Well, that was an apartment complex,
Yeah.
but yeah. Okay, so we have a,
We'll change that.
before we actually vote on the motion, is there a need to revise the variance findings, given the change? Is there any specific language that we capture in this?
Well,
I'm just quickly scanning through.
I don't think the findings are specific to the size or placement of the signs.
Okay.
We're just dealing with maintenance and
No.
length of time, I think.
I just want to make sure we're capturing. No,
We
I don't
will,
see-
we will modify condition 1B that refers to the approved plans, because obviously it's a different set of plans, and of course, we need you to leave those plans with us, so we know what was approved.
Okay. Of course.
Okay, with all that, we have a
Assuming
motion
it's
by
approved.
Commissioner Hoff and a second by Commissioner Cardoza. So let's do a roll on that.
Commissioner Cardoza,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoff,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeffrey,
Yes,
Vice Chair Donaldson,
grudgingly.
Aye.
Chair Martin.
Aye.
5 ayes, the application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.
And you'll leave that information with the planning staff there. Thank you. Okay, next public hearing item is Avenue 64 pole signs at 6399 Christie Avenue. And Susan, I think that's yours again. And Frank has rejoined us. I know. They did. Were you watching downstairs? Oh, it got feisty up here.
More signs. Okay, this is a major sign permit to allow 4 permanent pole signs and 1 temporary project identity banner sign at a new residential development located at 6,335 Christie Avenue. That's in the mixed-use zone. The pole signs are proposed to be 16 feet tall, and the temporary project identity sign is proposed to be 36 feet by 37 feet.
Getting bigger all the time.
So the project is located, I don't know if you can see this. Should we turn the lights? Oh, can we see better if we do that?
We have a picture of
Okay.
it.
Okay. So this is the Avenue 64 project located on 64th and Christie, and the signs will be, oops, I'm sorry. The signs are actually, I marked this wrong. The signs are proposed to be here. The pole signs are proposed to be here, and the banner sign is proposed back here fronting on, back here fronting on the I-80 freeway.
Did you say there were 2 banner signs?
This proposal has 1 temporary banner sign and 4 permanent pole signs.
This banner sign doesn't face the freeway?
Yeah,
Or
it
does? Oh, that's
Yes.
on the freeway side?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes, this is the temporary banner
On
sign
the freeway
Has
side.
that already been
on
approved?
the freeway. Pardon me?
Has that been approved?
No,
That's
no,
before us.
this is before you tonight.
Because it's here.
There is something there, yes.
The existing one you're talking about, yeah.
That one was not approved,
Oh,
so it was installed without benefit of a permit.
Oh, that wasn't in our staff report.
I had requested that they take it down before the hearing, so. Okay. So let's talk about the pole signs first. Pole signs, by definition of the code and the zoning code, are not eligible for administrative approval and therefore require planning commission approval. The proposed size and the time frame of the temporary banner also exceeds what we can administratively approve. That's why it's before you tonight as well. So for the pole signs, this is the proposed location of them in front of the sales office that's, and the leasing office, I'm sorry, that's already approved part of the project. Here. Located here, interspersed among the canopy of palm trees to provide a softening of the effect that the pole signs will have on the streetscape.
Susan, are those pole signs located within the public right-of-way?
They are not.
Thank you.
A component of the pole signs is that they are constructed of aluminum, and they have these interchangeable 72-inch by 24-inch aluminum banner panels for 3 of the 4 signs, so that they can change out information as desired or needed. The 4th pole sign that's being proposed is a project identity sign, and it would not have that component of the interchangeable sort of banners. The letters on the banner signs are 6 inches each, and the numbers are a little bit larger at 9 inches each. And they begin about 10 feet from the ground and run to the top of the pole. And I believe I said the poles themselves are proposed to be 16 feet tall.
Are these illuminated?
They are not illuminated, no. So this project is a rental residential project, and the permanent leasing office is part of the original approval. So that's why they're proposing the pole signs there and are kind of trying to have a permanent look to them by interspersing them with the canopy of the palm trees. Okay, now to the temporary sign. And I think this one that is,
Before you get the sign in front, that has the 4 signs on it,
yes?
what is it going to say? It doesn't say here, it says to be determined.
The lease sign?
These,
Or lease?
yeah.
You're talking about the lease sign?
Yeah, the lease sign and the one in
Right.
front.
Well, this, in your package, sheet E-5.4, they have a couple of options here. Option 1, front and back view. Option 2, or 3 and 4. So that's the idea for them to have interchangeable aluminum banners, that they have multiple things that just either have project identity as shown here or now leasing.
We're talking about the one in front of the leasing office
talking about
with
the
the
other
little
side.
fins on it.
E1.0.
Okay, sorry.
That's the permanent sign, I think.
Yes.
They're all permanent signs.
But are they interchangeable?
Yes, they are all permanent signs. They're the
But-
3.
The
think
project
the big one.
identity sign would not be changeable.
Yeah,
Those
the
are
project
permanent.
identity sign would not change.
So in that
It-
sense, it's permanent,
This one
more
here, is
permanent
this
than the other.
project
So the
sign?
one in the corner is the project identity sign.
Yes, that's the one that we're
That'll have
going
the
to.
street address or whatever.
Oh, yes, it looks like this. It has the Avenue 64, sort of, the project name. And then these are to be determined because they have a commercial component that they don't know the tenant as of yet. The other, this says leasing here, shops, and then these are empty. And the thing they do know that they want to have is this 19.5-inch tall parking directional sign. So this one is the permanent
Do
one.
we get to see the signs before they put the new names on it?
I'm sorry?
Do we get to see what they're going to put on the sign?
If you would
Well,
like
that
to.
would be a staff decision.
Or the
We just
staff.
approved the design, I think.
Well, they gave, the applicant has given some options here. I don't know if this is, the sum total of the options, or if they have other
Where is that stated?
on sheet E5.4.
sheet E 5.4. Those show the options for the different installations of the banners that can be displayed.
So Art, your question goes to the 2 small,
Well, actually, it goes to all of them. If these signs on the side are interchangeable, and they could just put up any sign they want, that may not be acceptable.
Could it be that the staff has to approve it?
If you desire, yes.
I would go along with.
Yeah,
If
we can
you-
certainly put that condition in there.
Yeah, if you'd like the condition to be that,
I'd like
the
I'd like an
interchangeable.
administrative review when they decide to change these signs, so
that's a
they,
good point. Let's have Susan finish her presentation, then we'll open the public hearing and discuss it.
Okay, yeah, we will do that. Okay, so these are the interchangeable signs. Then we looked at the permanent project identity sign, and now this is the proposed very large banner sign. So as I said, this banner sign is proposed to be 36 feet by 37 feet. And it will be located, I don't know if you can see this very well, but you should have it in your packet, located along the I-80 freeway here for maximum exposure. Staff feels that this size is excessive, and we are recommending that the applicant reduce the size of the banner by half. And I still think that would be big enough. As it appears in the submittal package, it's not really to scale, and I had asked them to make it a little bit more to scale. As it looks right now, it's about 20 feet by 18 feet, so we're not getting a real proper representation of what 36 by 37 feet would look like. It would actually cover at least one more story of the building.
Even though the image clearly shows 36 feet by 37 feet? Okay.
So this is smaller than what's up now is smaller than what they want?
I don't have the dimensions of the sign that's up right now. I imagine that what appears here is more on scale of what is there, but what they're proposing is larger.
Oh,
And is this sign that you have upright displayed, is that still on the west face of the building? This is a photograph of a sign, not a photo montage, so.
No, that's a photo montage.
This is a photo
That sign does not
montage.
currently exist.
No.
Oh, okay.
It's not currently installed.
there is a sign there.
There is one, yes.
But it's not this sign.
It's not this sign, and it's not they're not proposing that. They simply installed it without benefit of a permit.
Construct, to be
Okay.
finished, to be available fall of this year.
Any more questions for Susan? With that, we'll hear from the applicant. Thanks, Susan. Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Yes, I would.
Good evening. I'm Ray St. Francis with Scott Architectural Graphics in Santa Rosa.
I'm going to ask you to talk right into the microphone so everybody can hear
Ray
you.
St. Francis with Scott Architectural Graphics in Santa Rosa. We are doing the whole sign program for the building, interior, exterior, the retail component, of which is represented on part of that pole sign that was discussed at the lead edge, the project identity sign. And it came to our attention that the owner would like to add some marketing material, so those 3 banner poles, as we call them, came into being after the initial design of the project ID sign. And so we took that same design for continuity and added the 3 in a rhythm that related to the landscape area. And in your booklet, you have this sheet that shows the 4 of them on that plaza. As Susan pointed out, they are below the canopy of the palms, and the palms are now in place, so you can see the height of the palms. This sign is about 1.5 feet or so below the top of the palms, as are the...
I'm going to ask you to grab that portable mic there so you can move around and talk right into the microphone.
How's that?
There should be a switch on the side. You push up and it should be green.
Battery check. There we go.
Yep, there you go.
This is on. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the project ID sign. This was the original design we had, which was meant to go on the corner so that as you traveled north on Christie...
You can actually put those on the overhead so everybody at home can look at them
Okay.
as well.
Oh, I see, of course.
Commissioners have screens in front of them,
Okay, very
so they can see it too.
Oh, I see. I didn't realize that. So this sign is the original identity sign. It has the project name on the one side, and it has the 4 panels, one of which says leasing, to identify the leasing office. The other 3 are reserved for the 3 retail tenants that they will have in the 3 retail tenant spaces. And we suggested adding the international parking symbol below to direct people to the parking garage. So that is the initial sign. And then the marketing group at BRE wanted to add some marketing material so that people knew that there was a market opportunity, market apartments available. And so we created the 3 additional banner poles, which, as I said, we put in relationship to the project ID sign on the corner so that they acted as a group and it didn't seem like an afterthought. The one difference is the project ID sign is perpendicular to the street, so you can see it from north and south as you would be driving on Christie. And the banner poles, primarily being set further back on the property, face Christie. They would be double-faced, however, with the same graphics on both sides. So that's a photo of the site several months ago. And you also have this drawing that shows the relationship to the palm trees. And the idea is that it all look of a piece, that it be similar in coloration to the palette established in the building. Excuse me. The colors are the BRE corporate colors that we used for the banners. But the term banner is loosely applied here. Excuse me, I'll have some water. because this site being a very windy site coming directly off of the bay, and this was a concern raised by staff, that a banner would not last long. It would probably be tattered in the wind, flapping away, and they were very concerned about maintenance. So we took that as a clue to change the material from a fabric to rigid aluminum. So this is 3/8 inch aluminum sheet painted with vinyl graphics added. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Do you have a material sample?
I do not have one. It's just 3/8 inch flat material. The banners, as we call them, are 2 feet by 6 feet. So they are, 3 of those would be 36 square feet of graphic facing the street. The project ID pole has, as was pointed out, 4 panels. Those are constructed all attached, as it is held in the sandwich of the 2 5-inch channels that make up the mast or the pole leg. So they would remain fixed, but if the tenant changed, the vinyl graphic on the panel could be changed out to represent the new tenant name. They're rather small, just 2 feet across and 10 inches high, each of them. So there isn't a lot of room for a whole lot of graphic treatment. It's primarily the name of the tenant. And it isn't envisioned that this will be a big graphic logo exercise, but rather identification.
And this is for the space that fronts on Christie?
That is correct. There
They'll-
are 3
they'll-
suites on Christie.
And there'll be no other signs on those stores?
That will be a separate application as an individual tenant will make that. There's no owner-supplied sign, no,
Is,
other than the street address.
the main entrance to the building is through that leasing office space?
Well, the main entrance, and I have a drawing I can show you, there's a grand stair to the north end of the project, just south of the 64th and Christie intersection. Would you like me to get a drawing?
Oh, I see the stair, and
Yeah,
so that would be the
that's
guest
the main entrance for visitors to the project, visiting tenants.
So this sign is a long way from that.
But the leasing office
That's
is
right, the
there.
leasing office is at
Oh,
the south end
I
of the
see,
project.
okay.
So
Leasing
this
office
relates
is
to the
right there.
leasing.
Yeah.
And it separates out the leasing traffic from tenant and visitor traffic.
So wouldn't you have some sort of name sign near the stairway then, or street address or something like that sort?
Yeah, do you have a master sign program yet for this development? And if
Yes,
so,
we have,
where is the
and-
major identification for the project?
There
how
is
does
a
that-
canopy at the entrance of the lobby, which is up here. And that was approved by staff because it conforms to
Oh, okay.
allowable area and materials, et cetera.
Do you have any signage on the building at the southeast corner that
No.
would be visible in the proximity to
There's
the?
none planned by the owner, but the tenant that occupies the commercial space will
Down
have
on the ground level, okay.
We have the sign program that staff approved administratively. These are the signs that, under the zoning ordinance, didn't require commission approval, unlike pole signs, which do. So
Do you want to just walk through those, Susan?
Okay. So,
You can just show us the pictures.
okay. So this is the primary project identity sign at the canopy.
This is a major stairway on facing Christie.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, that looks like a leasing office or something.
Sorry, Bess?
Is that the leasing office we're looking
No,
at?
no.
I don't see a stair there, though.
This
What's
is the
off to
sign.
the
It's on
right?
Christie.
Is this
It's
the
here.
sign right here?
Yep, that's the sign.
Oh, it's just a cutout, so just,
Okay.
It's
so
very sleek and elegant.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Okay. So then this just shows, I'm sorry, this is just another detail of it that shows this sign is an internally illuminated push-through acrylic. So these numbers will be illuminated.
So that's just to the left of the individual there, next to the stairway?
Yes, just the.
Right,
Yes.
okay.
This is the front part of the leasing office, which also fronts on Christie.
Right,
This is a detail of the letters, which 1-inch thick aluminum.
they are backlit,
Halo,
okay?
they're halo lit. And this is for the leasing office, just, real clean looking leasing here. Vinyl graphic here on the glass, Avenue 64 BRE.
Great.
This is the leasing office, which is on the corner. Again, just another detail of the leasing office, excuse me. And at the 64th Street entry, which is the 64th Street entryway, which is a side entrance to the leasing office. This one will be here, the Avenue 64. Again, the stainless, and that one is not lit. And then here is a directional that is, sorry, I don't. This is on the, okay, this is, thank you. This one is a directional office which leads you to the 3 buildings for the project, and it's on the podium. It's called the entry access plaque. And then here are some directional signs for the leasing and for the parking, which will be located on, this is on 64th, right? On 64th Street.
So these signs on this sheet are in the same vicinity of the ones we're being asked to approve, or?
No, they're spread out throughout the project.
I'm sorry, I'm not intimately familiar with where each of these are
Oh,
located,
okay.
just on answering, but we have a legend in the front of this package that we can address all those issues if you'd like. And this one, this would be on 65th, right? The direction. Okay, 64th and the freeway, this is a directional sign which tells you how to get to Clausen Engineers and also the resident parking for the development. And then as you're entering on 64th Street into the parking lot, there's just an entrance and clearance height sign, and that's it. And if you want to get an idea of where all of the signs are located that are part of this program, it's called out here, which I can,
I see.
if you'd
Okay.
like, I can, pass it along, because each of these, as they're called out, they describe what they are here. The project identity pole sign here, the primary project ID sign at the canopy here, the leasing office ID here, BRE logo graphic here and here and here, the tenant entry sign is, I don't see.
Probably on 64th Street.
So the one at the bottom right corner
This one?
is, yeah, that is the one we're approving.
Yes. That's the pole
Okay.
sign that
And then
faces
there's
both directions.
3 others behind it.
Can you scoot that up a little bit so we can see the whole area?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other 3 that are before you tonight are not on this, but they're here.
Yeah, I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions of the applicant or staff? Or were you finished with your presentation?
Well, I could say a few more words, but perhaps.
Any questions of the applicant?
Do you want to talk about the banner sign?
Oh, thank you.
The banners are, as I say, continue the motif. It's the same 5-inch double channel as a support, which relates to the channel that's used as an architectural detail on the building, so that it's a harmonious presentation of building and signage.
I think Commissioner Donaldson's referring to the large
Leasing
banner
sign.
facing
Big
the
leasing
freeway.
sign.
Well, the
Facing the
leasing banner,
freeway.
I have nothing to do with.
Okay. It looked somewhat different
I
than
can't
the
address
others.
that. If that's all there is on the fixed signs, then
Well,
Okay,
is it your intent that the fixed banner signs will be changed periodically?
periodically. As I started to say, they're rigid, so they'll accept the weather conditions at the site. Their background is painted, and they will have applied vinyl graphics, so it won't tear or blow away, and that will last for some years. However, it's expected they may want to periodically change the color or
Put Christmas on it.
I think it's primarily meant to talk about leasing and the
four red
identity
sign.
of the owner,
Not-
BRE
not-
and
not-
a apartment. So I don't think you'll see a lot of
Seasonal
seasonal
change.
greetings so much as to let people know that these are apartments for lease.
I th-
Because
And this-
otherwise,
And the
When you
two
just-
sign, and the sign in front that I was concerned about before would be limited to the name of the tenant.
that is correct. And
That's
and
all,
the fact
that's
that
all.
one of the tenants effectively is the leasing office. So
Okay.
leasing is the only one where you have identified now. The other three will be a commercial tenant.
Charlie, you had a comment?
Yes, I was just wondering if you have any idea how frequently those banner signs would be changed.
Well, I guess the owner could address that.
I was going to suggest that if you want to add a conditions requiring staff approval of any changes, that you limit it to no more than once every 6 months.
I
or something-
suggest you
something
draft
like
some language, so by the time we're finished with this, you could read that back to us.
Okay.
Because I agree with Commissioner Hoff on that. So if you could have something to suggest to us, that would be great. And John, did you want to, or is there someone here to discuss the temporary leasing sign?
Good evening. Good evening. My name is John Stevens. I'm with BRE Properties. With respect to the sign will be located along I-80. The reasoning for, heard some comments about the large size of the sign, is because we are on a highway frontage with a high speed limit. The size of the sign is necessary in order to provide visibility to the passerbys at a relatively high speed. Most of the sign that you're looking at is or half the bottom of the sign is a lifestyle image of the bay.
Do you
which
have
we
it to
believe-
put on the overhead there? Do you still have that,
I believe it's still up here.
so we can talk about it? Or you can talk about it?
It appears that it's,
Here you go, here's mine.
No, she's got it.
yes, the sign that we're proposing is 37 feet by 36 feet. And again, the size and scale is based on the, trying to capture traffic on I-80 as they're rapidly passing by. Half of the sign is made up of a lifestyle in order to create some interest. The sign that's there now is really a scaffolding shroud that's there during construction purposes. This sign, we feel that the size is warranted, again, because of speed, and second, we're trying to create some interest and generate that lifestyle. If we were just going to have the now leasing and phone number and shrink the sign, we'd lose that lifestyle and that kind of appeal to the sign that makes it more than just an advertisement.
How high are the letters on that?
I'm not sure the exact dimensions on the letters, but my guess is looking at the sign, they're probably 2 feet in height.
Can you explain why this photo montage shows that at 36 by 37 in this image, when in fact apparently it's only 20 feet or so tall? And if we're going to be approving something that's a third or almost twice again this size?
Well, the sign that's there now, and there was some reference made that this sign is about the size of the sign that's there today. The sign that's there today is 30 feet by approximately 10 feet that's there today. So this is relatively in scale. It's probably, the height of the sign is probably a little misleading. It is a 4-story building, approximately 45 feet in height, and the sign would go from about roof line to the top of the first floor level.
So the building is 4 stories high, and this sign is
Oh,
3 stories high.
Correct.
It would
It's
be
4 story.
it would be 3 stories high, but what we see here is about 1.5 stories at most high,
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
So it would be, yeah, at least.
twice as big as this.
Well, staff felt that
Come down
the
3 of the 4 floors.
right.
the view in the photo montage was ample, and we estimate that sign to be about 18 feet square. So
Okay.
that's why we recommend reducing the size of the sign to half.
Would this be the size of the sign that you would recommend, the one that we see here?
That's what
The
it
one
just
in the
said.
photo
Yeah.
montage,
They
right.
just said, okay.
What is the size of the sign on Green City Lofts? Is that, you have any idea?
I don't know offhand. Do you know, Susan?
Big.
It's big,
Yeah.
By 24?
but you can't see it.
Susan says it's 20 by 24.
This is just a temporary sign in order to help induce the leasing as we're getting going. The sign will be taken down as that building starts occupying in the back, which should be by the end of this year. We're only looking for a 6-month permission to post the sign along the back of the property. Again, it is highway frontage. Just,
And-
It's at a minimum of 7 months.
I agree with the staff. I think
Well, let's wait till we get to the public hearing, and then we'll go into that.
we have to give it to the public.
Was there any other questions for the applicant before we open the public hearing?
No.
well, just one comment to make note. When I say 4 stories, it's 4 stories of residential. And what you're looking at is actually above about a 12-foot podium level that's not visible from the highway. So when we say it's going to take up 4 of the, it's really going to take up 3 of the 5 stories of the building from the scale,
It's pretty big.
if you consider the podium level as well.
And what is your position with regard to staff recommendation to do something of the size that you've actually shown here rather than what the application is, which is 36 by 37? Are you comfortable with this image size here?
We understand staff's comments. We feel that 18 feet by 18, I believe, actually is not half the sign. It makes 25% of the sign that's represented here. We'd be very happy with what's similar to there today, which is 30 by 10, if that's possible. It'd be 300 square feet.
18 by 18 is the same.
18 by
yes, it is,
18
but
would be
it's-
324 square feet.
Yes.
Yeah, and the image you have displayed here is almost a square. It's not a,
We would probably go more rectangular, longer. Again, we're trying to capture that highway image. If we're shrinking up some of the text, we'll have to play with that. I guess maybe we could walk away today with some general guidelines with square footage that the commission recommends, and we can work with staff on an acceptable layout.
The image you've presented to us here tonight is what you plan to use, though, even if it's 30 by 10 or 18 by 18 or...
We would adjust the sign. We haven't come up with images that are 30 by 10. We have a 30 by 10 sign there that's today, but we'd like to bring some energy and life to that sign. That's why we're going with the 36 by 37 in order to bring out some lifestyle.
Well, staff is recommending that the commission approve this sign tonight with the dimensions shrunk to half, which would result in a sign that is 1/4 as large. And if you just approve it that way, then it's just, there's no further negotiation. It's just that sign. It's just smaller.
Right, it's a quarter as large as what they're requesting, but it's about what is shown on this picture.
That's correct.
May I say something? I'm John Whalen with BRE Properties, Vice President of Development. And I just want to appeal to you. I can see where this is going. We're asking for a variance from what staff recommends because what we're trying to do is lease 224 apartment units in a matter of 6 months, which is a challenge. And you have 300,000 trips that are on that freeway going at a relatively high speed except during rush hour. And we think that we really need a sign larger than 18 by 18. We currently have a sign that's 30 by 10, which is really proving to be inadequate. We need something, now maybe it's not 37 feet tall, maybe it's 25 feet tall or something, but we have found, and if you've driven by the project, that the 30 by 10 goes right by you, you miss it. And we're trying to get the phone number out and the message out that we have a project that is in lease up, and it's only a temporary for a period of 6 months. So I appeal to you that we settle on something that's larger than 18 by 18 because, to be honest with you, that would be totally inadequate and we wouldn't even bother with it.
But
It wouldn't serve us any purpose.
your existing sign at least has a web address, and the new one doesn't. And, to me, I've always been curious about new buildings coming up, and I always check the website to see what the apartments look like.
The first sign had a web address. The second sign does not. There's just some internally, we just don't know which is better, a phone number or a web address. From that perspective, I appeal to you that maybe we can settle on something larger than 18 by 18 because we have a pretty daunting task in front of us to lease 224 units in a period of 6 months. And then in regards to the permanent signage, I don't know if there's any opposition to that, but I'd just like to articulate a few things. On an annual basis, we have about 50 to 70% rollover in our units a year. That means that we have to lease 130 to 160 units a year, which is, once again, a pretty significant marketing task. And as you can tell, the signage that we have is very sleek, very minimalistic. And what we're asking is something that allows us to have a little more punch from the marketing standpoint. I believe that what we've presented on those banners are tasteful and architectural in style. And I have no problem agreeing to, if we ever change them out or want to do something, that we go for staff approval. But that would really help us. As you can see, the signage is very low key, and we still have a job to lease up the units, and our marketing department really feels that this would be a critical element to it. So thank you for your consideration.
John, can you explain why this montage shows a sign that's a quarter of what you're actually proposing?
I can't, this is the first I've seen of it, but I would say that I believe that if I look at that montage looks like it's 25 feet tall, because you have 2.5 floors covered by a banner in height.
1.5.
You're
If I'm looking at,
scaffolding, which is
But Charlie, you said staff did some measuring and got this to scale, and what was the size of it again?
well, looking at this is a better picture. That's over 20 feet tall. I will guarantee you that.
We just estimate, but based on, I mean, it's a little bit hard to tell because of the angle here, but it appears that it goes from about the bottom of the second-story window to slightly above the top of the third-story window.
Right.
And if the floor-to-floor height in a residential building is about 10 feet,
Yeah,
then that's a little less than 20 feet.
right.
So it's just eyeballing it, but we guesstimate it's about 18 feet, which is half of 36.
What I'm struggling with, and the reason I asked the question, is what's appropriate here? We don't have information that shows what you really want to do
Well,
here. And
there's obviously a discrepancy between what you see on the right and what you see on the left. There's no doubt about that.
May I suggest that the commission open the public hearing and then have
Sure.
their discussion about
good
this?
suggestion.
Yeah, that's
Okay, thanks, John. With that, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this item? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. And
May I offer a suggestion?
go ahead,
Just for
Charlie.
your consideration. Just as a compromise on this banner sign, would be to allow something that's, say, 25 by 26 feet. That would be smaller than what they're requesting, larger than what's shown in the photo montage, and approximately half of the area of what they're requesting.
Well, before we get to that, I'd like to suggest we approve the simple small signs in the front, which I think are consistent with all the other graphic work they're doing.
Is that a motion?
My feeling on the banner sign, I like the staff's original proposal of 18 by 18. Someone going 65 and 70 miles on that freeway isn't going to see much of any sign, in my opinion. And I think the staff's proposal is adequate. I'd be in favor of the 18 by 18 sign for 6 months.
And you also had a suggestion about making sure that staff reviewed
Yeah,
any change to the banner sign.
Right,
to the,
he's going to do that, isn't he?
well, Charlie, you were going to work out some language.
Yeah, would you like to hear that?
That would be great.
Yeah, we'd add to the first conditions in the appropriate place. Graphics on the permanent banner pole shall be reviewed and approved by the planning director prior to being installed or changed, and shall not be changed more frequently than once every 6 months.
I think that that's a good suggestion. I think that the sign proposed at 36 by 37 feet is just way, way too big. The sign that you're showing here has a lot of information that isn't going to read that well if you go quickly. If you redesign something that is as tasteful as the other signs that you've got on the rest of the project, I think it should work fine at a smaller size. Traffic along that part of the freeway doesn't typically move very fast. In my
That's what I was
experience,
gonna say.
you're going to have people sitting there looking at that sign a
That's a
lot.
good point.
If
5
you're
minutes.
afraid that people aren't going to be able to read it because they're going by too fast, they're not going to be able to see the Avenue 64, the Live With This View 24/7. They're not really going to be able to take in what you're trying to put on there anyway. So I would rather see a smaller sign that has simplified information on it that gets the units sold and that's down in 6 months. Gets them rented and is down
I
in
don't think
6
the
months.
view picture is going to be something anyone can focus on
Right.
driving by.
And it may be useful to actually move that image further north so the PPP building doesn't obstruct people moving north. Because right now you've got some buildings that sort of distract as you head north. I don't know if that location would have to be adjusted if they wanted to put it closer to 64th Street for the image. Would that, and according to the plans that we're approving here tonight, Charlie, would that have to be shown as an adjusted location?
I'm sorry,
Originally,
what was
the
your
staff
question?
was
I'm
recommending-
suggesting that they move that banner closer to 64th Street so it's
Oh,
more visible
Going south on the freeway?
going south or north,
well,
particularly for northbound traffic.
frankly, my humble opinion is I would just let them put it wherever they think is the
Yeah.
most appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay? My question is whether, because we're approving something with something shown on the plan, that's
Oh.
something that should be
Uh,
acknowledged somewhere.
yeah, well, I would take the positioning of this as somewhat illustrative. I mean,
Okay,
I think your approval would be for a banner of whatever size you decide on the west side of the building.
okay. Does the commission agree with the language that Charlie suggested for the pole signs?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other question is the size of the freeway banner. For-
I think I'd be more apt to give them the leeway for a 20 by 25 just because it does just face the freeway, and he made a good point that he's trying to rent up a lot of units, but
It's only
I'm
for
in the-
6 months.
and it's only for 6 months. It's on scaffolding, but I'm in the minority, it seems. So.
I'm not
If
sure you
you're
are.
if you're echoing what I was suggesting, I was
Yes,
suggesting
I'm echoing what staff
I was
suggested.
suggesting 25 by 26.
It seems to be more in
which is
scale with
closer
what
to
they
the-
actually have
Yeah.
here, and that it is big, but it does face the freeway, and so that's just my opinion.
So do we want to suggest 500 square feet rather than something, he was
That's what I was
suggesting
gonna say. That's a
something
good
that was
idea.
vertical, so if we could go. Okay.
Okay, well, that would be good.
Is anyone else bothered by the size? of
No.
Staff's recommendation, 25 by 26?
No, I think that's a good compromise. But, it would, I would really appreciate if in fact you come back to us. I hope that isn't the case. I hope the units are rented up very quickly. But if it becomes necessary to come back to the commission again, I would really appreciate having some information and sort of saying what's working for you is having a website, because we've gone down this road before and we've been told different things. And if we're going to have to be reconsidering signage for another 6 months or bigger and better signs, I really want to know what the data is telling you. But I do want to commend you on the design for your overall signage plan. I just think it's very elegant, simple and elegant, and the colors are great. And I really appreciate the universal P sign because we really want to make sure we get people directed to the parking area quickly. So I would support Charlie's recommendation for the 25-foot by 26-foot temporary sign.
Is that a motion
Yes.
with the revised language for the pole signs
Yes.
as well?
I'll second that.
So a motion by Commissioner Jeffrey and a second by Cordoza. Can we have a roll call? If there's no further discussion?
Commissioner Cardoza,
Aye.
Commissioner Flores,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoff,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeffrey,
Aye.
Vice Chair Donaldson,
Aye.
Chair Martin.
Aye.
6 ayes, the application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.
Okay, next item on the agenda is study session items, and we have the Big Four traffic study. I think, Charlie, you have a team of consultants.
Yeah, this is a team effort here.
Do we want to take a 5-minute break? Or
Let's
is the
keep
commission
going.
ready to go?
Let's
Okay,
go.
we're ready to
It's gonna
go.
be a long one.
If you're coming from this end, it
It's 8 o'clock and we'll finish at 9.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll hold my breath.
Don't hold your breath.
We'll wager.
Yeah.
Difficult.
Dave, could we have the, yes, thank you. Okay, just give me a second to get myself organized here.
It is. We got a drum roll.
So as I said, this is a team effort. This was a study that was done by Farron Piers and Kimley Horn. And we have Rob Reese here from Farron Piers and Steve Chan from Kimley Horn. Farron Piers' efforts were overseen by Miru, and Kimley Horn's efforts were overseen by Maurice Kaufman, an acting public works director, both of whom are also here. Miru wrote the staff report that's in your packet, and that was reviewed by me and Maurice, and I will be doing the presentation, which everyone has reviewed. So we're all here, and we're all available to answer any questions you may have at the end of this as appropriate. Just a little forewarning, this presentation is about 30 minutes, and then we'll have commission and public discussion.
Can we get water?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, the Big Four projects, as you know, are the Marketplace redevelopment, Site B, the Transit Center, and the Gateway project. And the questions that were addressed by this study are, what will traffic be like in 2030 with and without the Big Four projects? That is, what will the impact of the Big Four projects be on traffic in the future? What will traffic be like in 2030 if the Chiron project does not build out? Chiron is sort of the elephant in the room that we sometimes don't talk about, but they, as you probably know, have a 30-year master plan that was approved some 10 or 15 years ago, which, if it does build out completely to the full 2.2 million square feet that's been entitled, will generate quite a bit of traffic. And most of our studies of cumulative future traffic include all the traffic from that Chiron build-out, which tends to sort of overwhelm everything else. We wanted to take a look at what would happen if, perchance, Chiron doesn't build the full 2.2 million square feet that they're entitled to. So we did look at some scenarios in which Chiron does not fully build out. Well, it's now known as Novartis, but Chiron is the name of the PUD. What roadway improvements would be needed to accommodate all of this future traffic? And what out-of-the-box ideas might help to improve traffic? These are various ideas that have been discussed over the last couple of years that we wanted our consultants to look at, in addition to just traditional signals and lane widening and things like that, and you'll see what those are in a minute. Now, there were a number of questions that were not addressed in the study. Principally, what effect would these recommendations have on pedestrians, bicyclists, and public transit? How can we improve the environment for pedestrians, bicyclists, and public transit while still trying to address the issues of auto congestion, traffic congestion, which are sometimes somewhat mutually exclusive? And if there is a conflict between cars and pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit improvements, how can we prioritize and choose? So let me be clear, this is a study about moving cars. That's primarily what it's about. It's not about pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit. There are some pedestrian proposals that are in here. They are analyzed in the context of what effect they will have on the ability of cars to move around. However, we do have an alternative transportation study which is just getting underway that will address the issue of public transit and related pedestrian and bicycle issues. This is the location of the Big Four projects. Just for orientation, here's the freeway. This is the railroad here. Powell Street is here down the middle. San Pablo is over here. This is 40th and Shellmound running up this way. The Marketplace project is here, just west of the railroad between 64th and Powell. The BRE Gateway project is over here at Powell and Christie. The Site B project is here south of Powell between the railroad and Shellmound. And the Transit Center is up here next to the Amtrak station just east of the railroad tracks. And this is the location, just for reference, of the Chiron campus, which has previously been approved. The assumptions that were made about what these four developments will be are shown here in this chart. Now, I have to say here that all four projects are kind of moving targets. They're constantly evolving, and this is what they looked like when this study was getting underway. I'm not sure that any of them looks exactly like this today, and they'll probably all be different still if and when they're eventually approved and constructed. But for future planning purposes, this is the kind of order of magnitude of what we're looking at, so it's sufficient for that kind of analysis. The total, as shown here, would be 790 residential units, 267,000 square feet of retail, 250 hotel rooms, and 250,000 square feet of office and lab space. The assumptions about Chiron, the limited Chiron development would only include Building 3 and 7B. Building 3 is a new lab building similar to the existing newer building at 53rd and Hollis, which is Building 4, except that it would be larger than that building. It would be 350,000 square feet. Building 7B is a small utility plant that would be expanded. The full Chiron build-out scenario includes Building 3 and 7B. It also would include the new office building at Stanford and Hollis, which is 220,000 square feet, and about 350,000 square feet of other buildings, for a total of about 920,000 new square feet. That's in addition to the square footage that currently exists on the campus, of course. So 4 scenarios were analyzed in this study. In all 4 scenarios, we have traffic that's out there today, of course. We also include traffic from future projects that are anticipated outside Emeryville in nearby Oakland and Berkeley, as well as traffic from reasonably foreseeable future Emeryville projects. Where the 4 scenarios differ is the scenario 1 includes the full Chiron build-out and no Big 4 projects. Scenario 2 is the limited Chiron build-out with no Big 4 projects, and that would be sort of the best case or least worst case scenario, in that it would be the least amount of square footage and therefore generate the least amount of traffic, as opposed to scenario 4, which would be full Chiron build-out and the Big 4, which is the so-called worst case scenario, the most amount of development. And we've highlighted that here because we'll be focusing mainly on that one through the rest of the analysis. And then finally scenario 4, which is limited Chiron build-out with the Big 4 projects. The approach to this study was that Fair and Peers analyzed the traditional level of service, which ranges from A through F, with A being best and F being the worst, at 37 intersections during the weekday evening peak hour. Generally, level of service E and F are considered unacceptable, and anything up to D is considered acceptable. They also analyzed the level of service at 22 of those intersections during the Saturday peak hour. Then they looked at the so-called Q spillback at 4 intersections in the Powell-Christie-Shellmound Loop area. What Q spillback is, that means when cars are lined up at a red light waiting for it to change, it looks at how many cars, or the length of the queue of the cars as compared to the length of the lane to hold those cars. And if the length of the queue is longer than the lane capacity, that means you have queue spillback, which means the queue will be spilling back into the next adjacent intersection and could impact the operation of that intersection. So they analyzed that. And then finally, they identified recommended roadway and signal improvements. Kimley Horn peer-reviewed all of the work that Fair and Peers did, so we have a second opinion, and I would say that in general the details differed, but they came to pretty much the same conclusions. Then they also analyzed 7 so-called out-of-the-box ideas to determine whether or not, in their opinion, these were feasible and effective. And they also analyzed Q spillback. Their analysis differed somewhat from Fair and Peers, however, because they looked at it with the recommended improvements in place, whereas Fair and Peers assumed that the improvements were not in place. So before we get into the analysis, just to sort of set the stage, this is what the existing traffic in Emeryville looks like. This is a traditional traffic volume map where the width of the line represents the proportional amount of traffic on the streets. So, of course, San Pablo Avenue over here and Ashby up here carry probably the most amount of traffic in this area, along with 40th and Shellmound. Frontage Road carries quite a bit. And then Hollis Street here in the middle carries somewhat less, and Shellmound north of Powell somewhat less. These other streets carry lesser amounts of traffic. And it's not rocket science that this section of Powell between Christie and the freeway, as we probably all know intuitively, carries the greatest volume of traffic of any street in the city. Powell Street also carries a fair amount out to Watergate and over here to Hollis, where it then goes off in different directions. So that's what it looks like today. These are the 37 intersections that were analyzed. The figure on the left shows all of them. The figure on the right is a detailed view of the central area. So we have from 7th and Ashby and San Pablo and Ashby in Berkeley up here on the north, down to 36th and 35th and San Pablo at the I-580 freeway. In Oakland on the south, also over here Mandela and Horton is in Oakland. The rest of the intersections are in Emeryville. Except for these on San Pablo, 65th and San Pablo and Stanford and San Pablo and Oakland. And pretty much all the major intersections in Emeryville were included in this analysis. This view on the right shows you in more detail the intersections in the immediate vicinity of the Big Four projects. So the analysis that Fair and Peers did showed that level of service E or F would be attained, meaning deficient operations, at 11 of the 37 intersections in the year 2030. And that will either be during the weekday PM peak or the Saturday peak hour or both. And these are those 11 intersections.
D or less?
I'm sorry, what did I
D
say?
or less, or just D? Intersection operation at D or less?
At E or F.
E, okay.
E or F, right. So this bar graph, we have a series of 4 bar graphs here that show you the results of the analysis in the 4 different scenarios. These represent the 11 intersections, and let me just quickly kind of walk you through how to read these charts. The blue on the bottom, as indicated in the legend over on the side, represents existing traffic. That's traffic that's out there today. The dark kind of brownish maroon band above that represents future traffic from projects in Oakland and Berkeley that are outside Emeryville. The yellow above that represents future projects that are in Emeryville, and then the light blue at the top represents Chiron traffic. This particular scenario is full Chiron build-out and no Big Four projects. And again, this is at the 11 intersections. Now, Scenario 2 is basically the same thing, except that Chiron is assumed to have limited build-out, which generates about 1/3 as much traffic. So if you flip back and forth between those two, you can see the effect of full Chiron versus limited Chiron build-out. And then if we add the Big Four on top of the limited Chiron build-out, it looks like this. And just to go through these additional colors, the kind of purpley here is Site B. The pinkish is Marketplace, the darker blue at the top is the Gateway project, and then this light blue band up here is the Transit Center. As you can see, Site B shows up primarily at Powell and Christie and Powell and the Freeway, and a little bit here at Powell and Hollis and San Pablo and Stanford, and most of the other intersections it's just a little sliver that you can barely see. Marketplace also shows up primarily at Powell and Christie and Powell and the Freeway, as well as Shellmound, 65th and Overland, and somewhat at Powell and Hollis. The other intersections is not so much. The Gateway project shows up primarily here at Powell and Christie and also Powell and Hollis, and not too much at most of the, well, a little bit here at San Pablo and Stanford and Shellmound and 65th, but not too much at the others. And the Transit Center shows up primarily at Powell and Hollis, 40th and Emory, 40th and San Pablo, and Shellmound, 65th Overland, and not too much in the others. Now, this is with limited Chiron build-out, and then if we go to the full Chiron build-out, you can see that everything pops up a little bit more. So if you flip between the so-called best case, or least worst case, and the worst case, which is scenario 2 and scenario 3, it looks like this. This is scenario 2, and this is scenario 3. So you can see that they go up somewhat, not a huge amount. Now, we could, as you can see, each of the various components adds a certain percentage to traffic at each of the intersections, and we could do a pie chart of each of these intersections to show you what that looks like. There's 4 scenarios and 11 intersections, so that would be 44 pie charts. Rather than show you 44 pie charts, we feel like that's too much information. We have prepared one pie chart, which is the intersection of Powell and Christie in scenario 3, and that looks like this. So what we have here is the existing traffic is about 77% of what will be there in 2030. Then the future projects outside Emeryville adds another 4%, and the future Emeryville projects adds another 7%. So total of existing and future projects is about 88% of the traffic. Chiron adds another 1.2%. And then the big 4 projects, the marketplace is about 4.5% of the traffic. Site B is about 5%. Gateway is about a little over 1%, and the transit center is about 0.5%. So that's how the future 2030 traffic breaks out at Powell and Christie under scenario 3. Now, as to the queuing problems, the so-called queue spillback analysis, the analysis showed that there would be queuing problems at the I-80 off-ramp at Powell Street, on Powell Street in both directions at I-80, on Powell Street in both directions at Christie, on Christie both directions at Powell, and on Shellmound Way at Christie. And then 2 things that were revealed was a rather long queue spillback on Shellmound Street, which would extend all the way from Shellmound Way out of the edge of this map all the way up to 65th Street in the PM peak hour. And on Powell Street on the bridge, extending from the intersection with Christie over to the railroad track and perhaps a little bit beyond past the proposed Site B Bay Street driveway.
And this is all the queue spillback without any suggested improvements?
Correct. Correct. So the next series of slides illustrates the recommended improvements that are coming from Fair and Piers, and I'll go through these fairly quickly, not in a lot of detail, but we can come back to them if you have questions or want me to elaborate. So this is Ashby and San Pablo in Berkeley, and I just want to note that for this intersection, it's in Berkeley and it involves 2 Caltrans state highways. So needless to say, we don't have jurisdiction over this. They would install 2 northbound left turn lanes from San Pablo to Ashby and a westbound left turn lane from Ashby onto San Pablo, modify the signal and widen Ashby and remove medians and bus stops within this area. At the Powell Street off-ramp, they're recommending widening it by about 12 feet and installing an additional lane, so we'll have dual left turn lanes and dual right turn lanes, and then modifying the signal. On Powell Street between Christie and Frontage Road, they're recommending widening Powell and adding a median and realigning the lanes so that we don't have the weaves under the freeway that we have today, and modifying the signals at the ramps and at Christie.
Did the last one include the center median?
Yes, it does. Construct a 15-foot median on Powell Street between Christie and the freeway.
Okay.
This is Christie Avenue, north of Powell Street, where they're recommending widening and adding a southbound exclusive left turn lane and modifying the signals at the 2 adjacent intersections. On Powell Street, east of Christie, they're recommending widening the bridge on the south side in order to provide enough room for a second left turn lane, and also then modifying the signal at Powell and Christie. This is at Hollis Street, where they are recommending widening the street, or at least moving the lanes over enough so that we can have left turns from both directions on Hollis Street that don't conflict with each other. Currently, those 2 left turns overlap, and so they have to be split phase. And they would also modify the signal. On San Pablo at Stanford, a second left turn lane northbound would be added, and medians and bus stops would be removed within this area, and the signal would be modified. Horton Street between Park Avenue and 40th would either be widened or on-street parking would be removed to provide for a southbound left turn lane and signal modification at 40th and Horton and a new signal at Horton and Park.
Charlie, on that, wouldn't that conflict with the Park Avenue plan? That recommendation?
Widening the street
Yeah.
could, yeah. Not removing the parking, I don't think would. And it might involve demolition of some Tier 1 or Tier 2 buildings as well. On Emery Street, between Park and 40th, they recommend, again, either widening or removing on-street parking in order to allow for a southbound left turn lane from Emery onto 40th and modifying the signal at the intersection. On 40th Street at San Pablo, they are recommending restriping the street, not widening it, but reconfiguring the existing lanes to allow for another right turn lane from 40th onto San Pablo and modifying the signal. And finally, on Horton Street at Mandela, which is in Oakland, they're recommending widening and a right turn lane and a new signal here. I forgot to mention, of course, that the intersection of San Pablo and Stanford is also in Oakland and involves a state highway, so that's also outside our jurisdiction, as is this one. In addition to these diagrams, they are also suggesting signal modifications at 7th and Ashby and Shell Mound, Overland, and 65th. We don't have diagrams for those because they're just signal modifications. So that concludes the Fair and Piers recommendations. And now I'll go into the Kimley-Horn analysis of the so-called out-of-the-box concepts. They were asked to look at 7 ideas. Those include a one-way loop configuration on Shell Mound and Christie, and they looked at 3 different possible configurations of that. Moving Shell Mound Way to the north, reconfiguring the lanes on Powell and Christie, adding a north crosswalk at the Powell-Christie intersection and creating a pedestrian scramble phase, having pedestrian bridges in the Shell Mound and Christie Loop area, a so-called pedestrian recall system in the Shell Mound Christie Loop area. That's where you get a pedestrian signal without having to push the button. And finally, reconfiguring the Powell Street Bridge to reduce it to 3 lanes and adding a sidewalk and bike path on the south side.
Wonderful.
So this is the Shell Mound Christie one-way loop. This is the first option that was analyzed, and in this option, Shell Mound Street would be one-way northbound from Shell Mound Way up to 65th Street. 65th Street would be one-way westbound for this block between Shell Mound and Christie Avenue would be one-way southbound as far as Shell Mound Street. So northbound traffic would go like this, and southbound traffic would go like that. In this scenario, the loop area would still be two-way. So you'd still have two-way operation here except for the existing one-way segment here between the Powell Street Plaza driveway and Shell Mound Street. This would increase the capacity of Shell Mound Street in the northbound direction. It would completely eliminate that Q spillback that was identified on Shell Mound Street up to, it says 64th here, but it's really all the way to 65th. And if this were implemented in conjunction with all of the other improvements, our consultants have determined that the level of service at the Powell and Christie intersection with the Big Four projects in place would actually be better than it is today under current conditions without the Big Four projects in place. And therefore, they are recommending this proposal. Now, a second option is the same as the first one, except that the one-way part of Christie would be extended down here from Shell Mound Way all the way to Powell Street. What this would do is it would prohibit any northbound turns from Powell to Christie, a left turn going eastbound or a right turn going westbound, and therefore more traffic would be forced to travel around the loop. So traffic trying to go this way and up here and over like this would have to go around the loop instead. This would therefore create problems at Powell and Christie, both with lane capacity and with pedestrian and vehicle conflicts, and for that reason this is not recommended by the consultants. And this is option 3, in which the one-way configuration would extend all the way down to where Christie and Shell Mound come back together again. So Shell Mound would be one-way northbound all the way through this area, and 65th and Christie would be one-way southbound all the way through this area. This is certainly the simplest and most straightforward proposal in terms of public perception. However, again, it would prevent northbound turns onto Christie and would force more traffic to have to go around the loop, therefore creating the problems of lane capacity and pedestrian and vehicle conflicts similar to option 2. And again, therefore, this option is not recommended by our consultants. The second thing they were asked to look at was relocating Shell Mound Way to the north. Shell Mound Way, as you know, is a one-block street here between Christie and Shell Mound Street, which goes in front of the Woodfin Hotel here and the BRE property at this end. This proposal would eliminate that street and relocate it a few hundred feet to the north on the other side of this building here. This structure, which is shown where the new street would be, is a one-level parking deck. It's not a very significant structure, and that parking deck could easily be relocated over here to where Shell Mound Street used to be. This would create more queuing distance from Powell Street back to Shell Mound Way. It would also create more queuing distance on Shell Mound Street south of Shell Mound Way, and it would create a larger, if this area ever redevelops in the future, this would create a much larger developable site north of Powell Street up to Shell Mound Way. It would align with the Woodfin driveway, creating a four-way intersection here. And currently, BRE is talking about possibly a hotel on the Gateway site, which would be located right here, so it would align with the entrance to that. However, our consultants feel that the expense of this is not justified by the marginal increases in queuing capacity that would be achieved, and for that reason, they are not recommending this. That's not to say that we can't still consider this proposal for other reasons. Concerning the Powell-Christie lane configurations, actually what this is very similar to the Fair and Piers recommendations, and this is such a critical area and such a critical proposal that we were asking Kimberly Horn to just take a second look at it. And so they're assuming the widening and the median, and they're also assuming dual left turn and right turn lanes from the ramp, dual right turn lanes from Powell onto Christie southbound, dual left turn lanes from from Powell onto Christie Powell westbound to Christie southbound, and an exclusive left turn lane from Christie southbound to Powell eastbound. They have determined that this would relieve most of the vehicle queuing problems in this area, and therefore they are recommending these improvements. Next, the so-called pedestrian scramble at Powell and Christie. This would install a new crosswalk at the north leg of this intersection, and then pedestrians would receive a walk signal in all directions. Their analysis shows that this would degrade the vehicular operation of this intersection from D to F, and that the vehicle queues would extend all the way across the bridge to Hollis, all the way west to the freeway, and all the way around the Shell Mound Loop, and for those reasons they are not recommending this.
Degrade vehicle operation at 2030 or over existing?
I believe it's at 2030. I'm not sure.
Because we're 2030, aren't we there anyway?
Yeah, from 2030.
2030, are we at F anyway?
Yeah.
It would degrade it for existing condition.
I think so. We can ask them to clarify that. The next proposal or suggestion would add bridges at the west and south legs of the Powell and Christie intersection, pedestrian bridges across the street. This clearly would eliminate all conflicts between pedestrians and right-turning vehicles on here and here and here, and it would significantly improve vehicular operation. Therefore, it's recommended by our consultants if funding and right-of-way is available. However, staff has serious reservations about this proposal for a number of reasons, including the long ramps that would be required or elevators that would be required, and also urban design implications. Frankly, we just don't think it's a great idea to take people off the street and put them up in the air to get them out of the way of the cars. But needless to say, we can have further discussions about that. The pedestrian recall proposal would be at all the intersections in the loop area, as shown here. Pedestrians would get the walk signal automatically without having to push the walk button. This, according to the analysis, would have a minimal impact on traffic during the peak period. However, seemingly somewhat paradoxically, it would delay vehicles during the non-peak periods. And for that reason, the consultants are recommending this during the peak hour only. Finally, they were asked to look at a bike path and sidewalk on the Powell Street Bridge. We would eliminate one vehicle travel lane, which would result in a total of 3 lanes on the bridge. You'd either have 1 lane in one direction and 2 lanes the other way, or each direction would start out at 2 lanes and transition to 1 halfway across the bridge, or vice versa. And in the area where the lane is eliminated on the south side of the bridge, we would add a sidewalk and a bike path. Kimley Horn ran the analysis with 1 less lane on the bridge, and they found, I think somewhat predictably, that this would exacerbate vehicle queues in whichever direction is constrained to only 1 lane, and for that reason they are not recommending this. So, to just summarize all of these recommendations, for signals, they are recommending modifying the signals at these, I think it's 11 intersections. New traffic signals are proposed at these 5 locations. These 3 here are actually part of the proposed projects. This one is the one on the bridge, the Powell Street Bridge at the Bay Street driveway. These 2 are on Shellmount Street in conjunction with the Marketplace project, garage and pedestrian crosswalk. The one down here is a new signal recommended at Park and Horton, and this is a new signal recommended at Mandela and Horton. And then we have the pedestrian recall signals in the loop area. This is the locations where they are recommending turning lane modifications at San Pablo and Ashby, at the I-80 ramps at Powell, at Powell and Christie, over here at San Pablo and Stanford, on Horton at 40th and Horton and Mandela, Emory and 40th, and San Pablo and 40th. And then finally, street reconfigurations. They are recommending street widenings in these locations on Ashby, Christie, Powell, the I-80 ramps, Hollis Street between Powell and Stanford. These 2 here are either widening the street or eliminating off-street parking. This is Horton between 40th and Park, and this is Emory between 40th and Park, and then this is Horton at Mandela. This little orange line is the proposed bridge widening on the Powell Street Bridge. This little purple segment represents where medians and bus stops would be removed on San Pablo at Stanford and Ashby. And finally, this is the one-way couplet on Shellmount and Christie. So in conclusion, it appears that all 4 scenarios would have similar traffic impacts with only marginal differences, so the recommendations really apply in all 4 scenarios. However, clearly, future congestion will be marginally worse if the big 4 projects are built than it would be if they weren't built. We estimate that the cost of the recommended roadway changes that are within our jurisdiction are approximately $8 million, and that doesn't include the right-of-way. It also doesn't include the Shellmount Christie Loop, which we estimate at about $2.5 million. So the total is about $10.5 million. And all future projects, including the Big 4 projects, should pay their fair share of the cost of these improvements. We also need to modify the traffic impact fee to include these projects and spread their costs over future developments, whatever projects it is that the City Council ultimately decides they want to implement. So the direction that we're seeking tonight from you is, first of all, do you agree with these recommendations for signals, turn movements, street widenings, and reconfigurations? And obviously this is not a yes or no question. There's a lot of recommendations here. You may agree with some and not with others. Secondly, do you agree with the recommendations on the out-of-the-box ideas, particularly the Shellmount Christie one-way loop? Again, not a yes or no question. There's a number of recommendations. And getting back to the issue that I mentioned at the beginning, how much emphasis should we put on moving cars as opposed to improving the environment for pedestrians, bicyclists, and public transit? And how do we weigh those trade-offs? And finally, is there any other information that the Commission would like to see that isn't here in this presentation? So that concludes the presentation, and as I said, I and Miru and Maurice and Steve and Rob are all here to try to answer any questions you may have, and we're anxious to hear your comments.
Excellent presentation, Charlie. Thanks.
Thank you.
Very impressive.
Questions for staff?
Yeah, I understand that Pixar has rights for a substantial increase in building area. Was that taken into consideration at all?
Yes, it was taken into
Probably
consideration.
in the 2030 scenario, I would think, right?
Yeah, it's in the 2030 scenario. It's part of the future Emeryville development, and actually, as it turns out, Pixar traffic isn't really all that much.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Charlie. On table 2 on page 3, where you show the level of service, the level of service from existing to scenario 4 goes up
We're going to put
dramat-
that on the overhead.
Yeah.
Dave, can we have the overhead, please? Thanks. So I'm sorry, what was your question?
My question is that, well, first of all, the statement is that it's obvious that scenario 4 decreases the level of service in almost every category from existing. My question is, does this analysis take into account the proposals that the consultants have made, the $8 million worth of improvements?
I don't believe so. Rob, do you want to come to the mic and respond to these questions?
Because it would,
This is Rob
Help
Reese
to
from
know
Fair and
Well, it
Clear.
would help to know.
Projected level of service
my follow-up question is, what is the cost benefit of spending $8 million? Is it going to improve it, or is it just a waste of time? That's where I'm going.
Rob, can you respond to that? The level of service at these intersections after the improvements are built.
The level of service after the improvements, all intersections would operate at acceptable levels. And
I'm sorry, say that again?
All intersections would operate at acceptable levels
Meaning D or
after the
better.
improvements, at D or better. Charlie had mentioned in his presentation with the one-way loop solution that too would operate at acceptable levels. From a general perspective, if I remember correctly, you wait approximately 2 cycle lengths to get through the Powell Christie.
So you're saying that if we do the improvements that you recommended, all intersections would be D, below D, above D?
Above
D,
D.
D or better.
Yeah.
D or better. Would that be in all the scenarios, even in scenario 3, the worst case scenario?
Yes.
It would be,
Yeah.
okay.
Conditions would operate better with all of the development than they operate today if you install all of the improvements with all of the development. And that includes development that is going on in Berkeley and West Oakland, as well as other projects in Emeryville.
And it
Yeah,
also
is-
includes
is
the
that-
Shell Christie one-way coupling.
And it includes the Shellmound Christie
Is
one.
this-
So that if without the one-way loop, Powell and Christie would not be operating at level D or better, or Shellmound and Shellmound Way, or?
That wasn't,
Yeah.
That was the
Yeah,
that was a
out of the
split,
box
that was a split
recommendation.
decision.
That's-
That
yeah.
wasn't your recommendation.
the,
Well, there is they
you-
have a
Yeah,
one-way
according-
recommendation too.
According to, we have another little table here that I guess is not in your report, but it says that Powell and Christie intersection without the one-way couplet, but with all the other improvements in place, would operate at level of service E on Saturday, at the Saturday peak hour,
without the one-way couplet.
without the one-way couplet.
Okay, and the Fair and Pierce recommendations does not include a one-way loop.
we did not study that.
Okay, that's an out-of-the-box
That was one of the out-of-the-box
recommendation.
things that Kimberly Horn was asked to look at.
Well, I think an important consideration, which you've identified on direction that you're looking from the commission, is that we don't know what improvements to bikes and pedestrian ways, how they will affect the overall level of service once those are integrated into it. And I have some concerns with that because I'm fearful that, we'll improve the condition out there for traffic, and when the study comes along for the pads and the bikes, and it might degrade some of those intersections, how is this going to be weighed? That's the concern to me. I think we need to start integrating that study quickly. When is that study anticipated to be completed?
Well, we anticipate bringing a contract to the council at their next meeting, so it hasn't started yet. And it's expected to take probably to the beginning of next year.
And we have projects that are going to be coming before us before then. Big 4 projects, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Marketplace.
The marketplace, yeah.
Thanks,
The
Charlie.
staff didn't like the idea of a raised walkway at Christie, but I think it's something that could be designed creatively as a gateway monument for the city. And
Shanghai.
it seems as if it does create, help dramatically with the traffic issue.
How about we go through questions and then open it to the public if anyone wants to speak, even though it's a study session item, and then we can come back to the commission for recommendations and approach. So,
Sure.
Does anyone else have any other questions regarding the study itself?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Charlie, there's two ends to the equation. One is fixing the streets to maximize the flow of traffic. The other side is controlling the type of development that produces the least amount of traffic. In a previous study, and I think it was a fair study, they said that residential, for example, as opposed to office building, creates far less traffic impact. Is there any way of looking at various development scenarios and how that would impact our traffic? Or is it just too complicated?
Well, that can be done.
And the one where it came out the most was the transit center. The office, should we have 250,000 square feet of office space, or we should have residential? And, that's kind of a policy decision, which I think impacts the traffic, or does it?
Well, yes, it definitely has an effect. The future, the non-Big Four, non-Chiron future projects were simply a best guess based on the list that we keep of future projects in Oakland and Berkeley and Emeryville that we use in our EIRs and other traffic studies, and we're constantly updating that list. And obviously, the farther you get out in the future, the more speculative it becomes. But we have made certain assumptions about what sites will go to residential and what sites will go to office and so forth. Obviously, if everything went to residential, you'd have less traffic in the future than if everything went to office or if everything went to regional retail or whatever. So we've just tried to take an educated guess. Different scenarios of different future assumptions could also be done. There's probably an infinite number of scenarios you could run, so we're trying to keep it simple here to look at the Big Four and Chiron and keep everything else constant.
Other questions?
In looking at the shell mound one-way possibilities, was there any thought given to looking at shell mound with different lane configurations, with left turn lanes or with other types of mitigation aside from one-way loop? When it was
Steve,
revealed
can
that
you
there was that big
respond to
queuing
that?
problem?
Their analysis, we didn't go into it in detail in the report, but their analysis does assume some reconfigurations of lanes at various locations, especially 65th and Shell Mound, and maybe some other places. This is Steve Chan from Kimley Horn.
Hi, the one-way loop scenario, that's basically what the staff directed Kimley Horn to look at. It's one of the out-of-the-box scenario. We did look at other lane configuration as the one-way loop approached the two-way street segments, but we did not look at changing the existing two-way operation on Shellman Street. That was found on the Fair and Pierce report or our initial study of it to be having severe queuing because of the limited left turn pocket available for these type of movements.
Right, I guess that was my question, was when they saw that there was a big queuing problem and they were suggesting other types of widenings and other types of lane configurations, did they look at?
We did not look at widening Shellman Street at all.
Let me just comment on that. One of the reasons why the one-way loop idea came up in the first place was that when Fair and Pierce was doing some preliminary analysis of the marketplace, I believe they concluded that Shellmount Street north of Shellmount Way would need to be widened to 4 lanes. And obviously that would have major implications for the Market Street project, because that would be another 25 or 30 feet of right-of-way that would have to be taken through that middle of that project. It seemed like you could accomplish the same thing by having 2 lanes northbound on Shellman and 2 lanes southbound on Christie. And so that's what this scenario does, and it doesn't require any widening of any streets.
We have some recommendations in this staff report that identify improvements to roadway segments that are outside of the jurisdiction of Emeryville. And did you run the model to look at a scenario where everything is built out except for those improvements that are beyond
Maybe you guys could
the city
stay up here.
boundaries?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, because Oakland might do something, but Berkeley would be extremely
Might
slow
not.
about doing anything.
So could you clarify your question?
Yeah, with the analysis, you identified that with all the improvements that are recommended, that the identified intersections would all be working at LOSD or better. Did you run a scenario that backed out those improvements to intersections or roadway segments that are not within the city limits of Emeryville?
There's 4 of them of this 11 that are outside
Right.
of it.
We did not look at what would happen if you didn't do the if you left the intersections outside the city as they are today. We did not look at how traffic would divert away from those intersections and onto other streets in Emeryville and in the surrounding area. So if you did not do the improvements, for example, at Stanford and San Pablo, then there would be less traffic that could get onto Powell Street to get towards the freeway. That traffic would get bottlenecked there. Same with up at Ashby, but we did not look at where that traffic might go if it can't make that left turn.
Although I would say that the focus of this study was, of course, the big 4 projects in Chiron, and I think it's actually 7 intersections that are either in Oakland or Berkeley. And if you remember the bar graphs that I showed, those intersections, the contribution to the traffic, if we made a pie chart of those intersections, the contribution of the big 4 and the Chiron to those intersections, I think, is quite a bit less than the ones that are in Emeryville. So if you're thinking about the impact of the big 4 projects, it doesn't make much difference.
Correct.
I think it's an important question because in my mind, it raises feasibility of all of the improvements that you've listed in Table 4, not just with regard to jurisdiction, but some of them with regard to physical limitation. The off-ramp to 80, you've got Caltrans you've got to deal with, and then the question of whether you can even fit the improvement, the bridge improvement to the west end of the Powell Bridge at Christie, and how that ties into retrofitting that bridge or redesigning the entire bridge, or what that does to the pedestrian circulation on the north side of Days Inn. So I'm wondering if you went through Table 4 and did some rating of feasibility for each of those proposed improvements as you did this analysis, or you're just simply assuming that all of these are going to be accomplished either within or outside our jurisdiction.
What we did is we approached it not by jurisdictional issue, but by the physical availability to do the improvement. And so with each of these improvements, we looked, for example, you mentioned the Powell Street Bridge. We have been in discussions, or we were in discussions with engineers who have looked at the bridge and found that it is feasible to do widening on the bridge. So it's not an infeasible project. It is something that can be done. Same with the Powell Street, the off-ramp. It can be widened. There is sufficient room to widen that off-ramp.
Just take out the landscaping on the east edge.
You have to balance things like landscaping with respect to that one. Horton Street, you can put in the left turn lane as an example onto 40th Street, but you do need to remove parking. If you decide that you want to be consistent with the Park Avenue district,
Right.
then you don't want to widen the road, and you have to balance bike lanes in that particular case versus parking. But it is
What about Powell between the bridge and Christie?
the Powell on Powell Street, on the north side of Powell Street, it is actually a very straightforward engineering project to widen that north side of Powell Street by about 14
Without acquiring.
feet.
without-
No, you do need to acquire the property.
So you're assuming acquisition of the Denny's and the 76 station?
Yeah.
Okay.
And same with the widening on Christie Avenue and the widening on the west side of Hollis Street at Powell Street. You would have to take some widening there. And that's some of the detail that is
Well, how could-
on the graphics.
You're talking about acquiring 2 properties and you can do all those projects for $8 million?
No.
No, that wasn't acquisition.
That's the
It
limitation.
says except
Not
right of way,
including
not
acquisition.
including acquisition of
Okay.
right of way.
But it would include retrofit of the Powell Street Bridge for
I
that
think-
additional lane?
Actually, Maurice is probably the person who should answer those questions. He's the one who came up with those cost estimates.
Okay.
If you want, Maurice, do you want to respond to that? You all know Maurice Kaufman, Acting Public Works Director.
Yes, we do.
Yes, I actually looked at all the various improvements and did a very rough cost estimate for the bridge, including the bridge widening. And the $8 million is approximate, but it doesn't include any right-of-way. So it does include the bridge. It does include some cost for the widening of the off-ramp, though, depending upon what Caltrans would require, if they decided that it wasn't allowed, then we'd have to take some property from the Powell Street Plaza side in order to accomplish that.
And did you do a matrix that shows those costs for each of the improvements?
I have worked that out. I didn't include it with the staff report, but I have that information.
Using the table 4
With it,
as the format?
with a table, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Go ahead, Frank.
Were any traffic reports looked at in neighboring jurisdictions like Berkeley and Oakland, where they're going over a new general plan, and maybe they already have some traffic reports and looked at those intersections? Did we look at neighboring cities and their traffic studies at all?
The information that we got from the West Oakland area was from the Wood Street project. It's about a 1,500 unit development along Wood Street corridor in West Oakland, and they had cumulative forecasts as to how much traffic would be going to the north. They did not identify any mitigations up into Emeryville, although if you look at the report, there is traffic that goes up into this area. And then as far as the Berkeley work goes, there was a study done, the West Berkeley Bowl, which is at the intersection of 9th and Hines, just north of Ashby Avenue. And they did a fairly detailed cumulative assessment of land use within West Berkeley. So we took that information along with the information from the Wood Street project and used that, as well as the Alameda County travel demand model, to come up with forecast traffic from development outside of Emeryville.
But nothing that showed modifications to any of the intersections that were.
None of those reports showed any modifications. Berkeley had a concern regarding the 2 northbound left turn lanes from San Pablo onto Ashby because of the fact that you have the transit system that runs on San Pablo Avenue, and they were concerned about what would happen if you had to relocate those bus stops. And basically what, in that situation, I tried to illustrate to them that it would be like San Pablo and 40th Street. If you were to put left turn lanes up at San Pablo to Ashby, it would look identical to what you have on San Pablo at 40th Street.
Is that it, Frank?
Yeah.
So there's been reference to the queuing problems at the off-ramp of 80 northbound. And there's a lot of references to part of the queuing problem there is people getting off the freeway and getting back on the freeway to avoid the jam there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason not to have some kind of a barrier or some kind of prohibition, and was that looked at as how how it would impact that without, because it sounds problematic. It sounds very expensive to widen that off-ramp, and it sounds problematic in terms of acquisition and coordination with Caltrans. So is there some simpler fix that could help?
The issue with that particular intersection is that it is under Caltrans control. So if you do anything within the intersection, it requires Caltrans approval. Widening the off-ramp is a standard engineering practice. If you were to prohibit the movement of traffic getting off the off-ramp and immediately returning to the freeway, that goes against Caltrans policy. And so you would have to file for an exemption to that policy in order to install that item. I might add that the issue with the off-ramp queuing is a problem during the weekday. Well, during any time I-80 is heavily congested, traffic uses that as a shortcut, if you will. But it also is congested on a Saturday when the freeway is moving at moderate levels. So the condition, while you can point to the freeway congestion, there are other extenuating circumstances.
So we're talking about two, and one for the off-ramp.
You would have 2 right turn lanes and a left turn through shared lane and a left turn lane. So you'd have 4 lanes total.
I've never done it, but why do people go straight there? Is that right back onto the freeway, or is that the...
It's so you can
Freeway
get ahead of
saving
2 or 3
They think
cars.
they're saving time.
Right.
Yeah,
If
Was it looked at to eliminate that?
Well, that's what
That's what we're
Roger's-
talking about.
Oh, good.
It would be hard to do because people have to turn left to get
Right.
up to Watergate.
You need to have a
and,
You need to have a break
to
in
go
that
straight.
median anyway in order for people turning left from Powell
Yeah.
to go north on the freeway. I think there is probably a way to configure that opening so that the left turns would be easy, but it would block people trying to go straight across. It's just it's kind of a geometry problem.
Yeah.
But, you know, Rob does indicate other issues with it, particularly Caltrans, which is the big
Yeah.
issue.
I mean, we could
Bollards that raise.
we could design something for you and make it work. There's enough room out there that you can shift things around and put in a pseudo barrier. Cars could still, go around it. But the bigger issue is that you have to file an exemption for a Caltrans policy, and oddly enough, Caltrans thinks more highly of their policies sometimes than their design.
Oddly.
So.
Any other questions? I've got a couple. Steve, can you explain the pedestrian recall that you've recommended, and you've identified a number of intersections? How does that operate? And it's just something you set in the controller to each of the signalized intersections?
Correct. It's just a programming parameter within the controller. There's no hardware to be installed.
So tell me how it works. The pedestrian comes up and it automatically goes off. They don't have to push the button, or what happens?
Correct. If we put pedestrian recall to the traffic signal, currently all the traffic signals within the loop area have a pedestrian button
You have to
that
activate
pedestrian have to activate. When we program it to have pedestrian recall, that means that pedestrian no longer have to push the button. The walk and don't walk phase will automatically come up every signal cycle on all the crosswalk.
Whether there's a
movement.
pedestrian there or
Whether
not.
there's pedestrian or not.
Okay. The last question I had is with regard to the general plan development assumptions. It was like a 6.8% contribution to the 2030 projection, and I'm just for future Emeryville development, and I'm wondering
Okay.
how the 2030 projection relates to the general plan that we're considering and future development in the whole city. Was there some magic number? You gave a population of 20,000
No.
people in town, or?
No, you haven't gotten copies of, we didn't burden you with the full document here. But in the back, and this is only the Fair and Pierce part of it, but in the back of this report, there's a table that, a matrix that goes on for several pages, which lists site by site each project that we anticipate in the future, and whether it's in the years 05 to 10, 10 to 15, 15, 20, whatever, 20, 25, 25, 30. For each site, how many, what use we expect it to be and how many units or how many square feet. This is something that Diana Kina of our staff maintains. She's been doing it for many years and is constantly updating it, and we use it. It's the same future project projections that we use for all of our EIRs, and would also be used in the assumptions for the general plan. So there isn't anything specific that came out of the general plan for this. We're all using the same set of assumptions.
So this is for any parcel that has some development potential, or these are development sites where there's some anticipated development?
It's both.
Oh.
It's both. It's sites that, it includes sites that we think are underutilized and could potentially change within the next 25 years.
Okay. I just want to make sure we've captured wherever we might be going for the general plan, including if we're talking about densification of certain areas, that we've at least considered that if we're looking critically at the Big Four and how this is all going to work.
Well, it's based on the current regulations that are in place. I don't think it assumes any radical departure from current development trends.
Okay. Any other questions before we let anyone wishing to speak on this item? Okay, is there anyone here wishing to speak to the commission? Come on up, introduce yourself, and we'll ask that you limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes.
Have a timer, please.
And then we'll ask that you sign in over here to the right.
Good evening. I'm Wendy Silvani. I'm the director of the Emeryville. And I'm always trying to champion transit, so I hate to see anything that doesn't take a look at what moving more cars does at the expense of transit. For those of you who don't know, we carry 4,000 people a day. We're growing. You know, every single year we've grown by at least 10%. Some years it's been 20. And when you do aggressive TDM in conjunction with having good service, people will use it. There are communities that have a 20 to 40% modal split, which means that 20 to 40% of the people are not using, cars. They're walking, they're biking, they're taking transit. They're carpooling. So I would urge us to, I'm always, a minute or two delay can make or break it for somebody's decision to take transit. They have schedules to keep, they have daycares to pick up at the end of the day. If we become unreliable because we can't get them on the first leg of their commute back to the BART station or to work in the morning, because traffic is, so backed up and we don't have priority and it becomes too long for them, we lose, we all lose. So I'm a proponent of looking at even making sure that any roadway improvements consider the signalization that we need and giving us priority, at least in the peak time. So I'm actually on the committee to select the consultant to do the alternative transportation study, and I think it's really important that all of the transportation elements, bicycle, pedestrian, parking policies, all those things get looked at before commitments get made for specific roadway improvements.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Anyone else wishing to speak to the commission?
Where did you
right over here. Okay, back to us. We're supposed to make recommendations on where to go with this. I think you had a very good point, Patty, about...
Well, that's what my recommendation
And I think
would
Wendy
be.
made a very good point as well. I'm just not sure how we're going to accomplish that if we're talking about the end of the year and seeing something, because obviously some of this is moving forward.
Well, do we want to know, do we have to come up with a policy that then can be applied to the next development that comes in before us? Is that what we're...
What was your suggestion?
Well, I'm concerned about, we really need to integrate pedestrian, bicycle, transit into the equation, because these are some really important recommendations that we will